Ahoy, comrades, ahoy. I think we're just waiting for, let's say, to get until 20. So four more comrades to 20, and then we are started. So if there are any comrades on the way online whom we can rush up to come through, let us so that we can get this process on the way. Here we are, 20 comrades in the space. Amandla. That's what we need. Just checking to see if our keynote speaker is in. Not yet. But we must begin.
He's in now. He has just joined.
Hello?
Dr. Sipo he has just joined. He's in now.
Aha. That sets us going. Amandla, comrades, let us get on with this process. Solidarity greetings, blessed greetings, Pan-African greetings, all the good greetings to you in this process where we want to re-energize ourselves, remobilize ourselves, refocus ourselves on the regional agenda and our platform, the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, to see really what are the needs of the times in our region and how we can leverage our solidarity to make a difference in the democratic space in Southern Africa. Amandla. To get us going, comrades, I don't know if there is someone from the church, key partner in our solidarity in this life and the life to come. If there is someone from the church to get us on with a word of prayer, that would be welcome. But otherwise, Comrade Vava, may you please get ready to welcome the house and give us a sense of why we are here and what we want to achieve this morning. Amandla,
I
a word
see,
of prayer, if there is
yeah,
someone
the
available.
chairperson, Mr. Hosiami, has just joined. He is also from South African Council of Churches. So maybe he can help us with the prayer.
Comrades, I was hoping we'd get into a moment of prayer, but I think if someone from the church comes, we'll get into that. Let me invite Comrade Vava to take the floor. Welcome, and let us to the objectives of this meeting. Comrade Vava.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, come.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Moderator, and revolutionary and warm greetings to everyone who has managed to join this meeting. This meeting is being hosted by the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, and it's the 6th that we've hosted so far annually. And our idea is for us to be able to reflect on the evolving civic space across the Southern African region. As you know that there are many challenges that are confronting us as a region, be it elections that have been very problematic, the rule of law, corruption, the shrinking of democratic space. As we have seen that our governments are essentially sharing notes on how to suppress their own citizens. Various pieces of legislation are being passed. Zimbabwe having passed the Private Voluntary Organizations Act that is now compelling NGOs or civic society organizations to go through some rigorous, registration process, which for us, we see it as a way of silencing, the critical voices and shutting down civic society organizations. And as a result, we have also seen some organizations, failing to meet the adequate requirements for the registration process. But above all, the other issues that are still confronting us as a region, and this meeting, it's coming just a few, in fact, 2 weeks away from the SADC Summit of Heads of States and Government that is going to be held in Madagascar on the third week of August. So we do hope that this conference is going to culminate
Komvava.
us. So we are going to have presentations from various countries.
Ahoy, Komvava. Komtate confirm if you hear me. I lost Vava. We're going to have numerous speakers from around the region?
Yes.
Sorry, I had been shut out of the.
Sabotage. Yeah.
Yeah, I talk, Janet.
Seems Vava has been shut out again. Comrade Tati, Vava was just outlining more on the objectives, the speakers for this meeting. Would you like to just pick up from there, and then when he comes, he can just seal, so that we can move on to the next phase of our meeting, just on the objectives, the speaker lineup, and the solidarity that is in this meeting today.
Thanks a lot, Comrade Fambai. I think I lost him when he was talking about our expectations from this meeting, which we hope will culminate in the development and adoption of a regional civil society position paper, which we hope to present to our SADC leaders ahead of the upcoming SADC summit as a tool for advocacy to amplify the voices and demands of the region's citizens. So we will have speakers from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe, from Malawi, from Swaziland, from Mozambique, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think these are some of the hotspots that we have identified that are going through either shrinking civic space, or there's already been some irregularities that have been noted as we head towards the forthcoming elections in Malawi and in Tanzania. But we also have the issue of xenophobia in South Africa that has been hanging over our heads for quite a very long time. And we'll have a speaker to speak on that as well. But we also intend to draw lessons from, I know there may be a bit of contrast there, but we will be drawing lessons from Malawi and Tanzania, where there have been repressive laws that are aimed at restricting civil society operations. So we would like to hear from our comrades from Malawi, Tanzania, and also Zambia on how they've managed to navigate those restrictive NGO laws. And over and above, I think we just really need to revive and strengthen our cross-border solidarity ties towards more progressive thinking and action across the region, like we have done in the past. Find ways that are more creative. How can we collaborate more in the face of even shrinking funding as well? So yeah, I think in a nutshell, these are our expectations. We really need to come up with action plans that are short to medium to long term. What exactly are we saying in terms of the issues that are coming up in Malawi, in Tanzania? What is our position as regional solidarity partners? What are our expectations from these elections? Are we going to accept elections that have become ritual, where we can already foretell what is going to happen? Or are we just going to keep quiet? So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that is what we seek to achieve from this meeting. I will
Viva,
Okay.
thank you, comrade. Quickly, comrade, someone might be in this meeting and they have no sense of what has brought us to this moment as a coalition, what this tradition of solidarity is all about. Who is this coalition? Just quickly, so that people can have that and a sense of why you are able to then convene the region and ask what are the democratic challenges and what could be the solidarity response. Who is crisis and what is our history, our struggle pedigree?
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Fambai. So the Crisis Zimbabwe Coalition is an organization that was formed on the 3rd of August of 2001 as a platform to push for democratic reforms in the country. And the coalition has been working on issues around constitutional reform, electoral reforms, but above all, we have a regional office that was created in South Africa in 2004. And I'm happy to say that one of our founders, Prof. Raftoplas, is in the meeting. And the aim there was to amplify, the Zim struggle in the region, engaging the South African government, engaging SADC and the AU. So the regional office also acted as a hub of coordinating solidarity on matters concerning Zimbabwe. And right now, Zimbabwe is confronted by, a whole lot of injustices. I've mentioned the PVO Act that is restricting the work of civic society. I can't talk of the arrest, the surveillance, the decimation of, political parties that are opposed to the government of Zimbabwe. And we are trying to have this platform so that at least we get ideas on how we can cross-pollinate our ideas and how we can coordinate more effectively beyond, the issues that are only confronting Zimbabwe. As you are aware that last year we also dispatched a delegation to Mozambique where we met our counterparts there in trying to push, the SADC region and all the stakeholders so that at least there's a lasting solution to the crisis that was happening in Mozambique and various other countries that the coalition has been working on. And we hope that that solidarity and that platform is going to expand as we try to synergize our efforts together. Thank you.
Viva Comrade Vava, viva solidarity, viva consciousness, conscious response to oppression, dispossession, repression in our region. Once again, welcome all comrades. We just take this moment quickly to invite you on the chat box again, comrades, to just send us your strength and your solidarity, which movements you're coming from, and also a sense of your expectations. Kumvava, you've laid out some of the issues that you see in our horizons, the perennial challenge of disputed elections, the challenge of xenophobic violence, the challenges of corruption, shrinking civic space, breakdown in the rule of law. These are challenges that are at foot. Our hope really is to see and recognize that all these forms of oppression have a central link. They have similar root causes. And these are the root causes that our solidarity must be deployed against, so that through solidarity, really we can contribute to the liberation of our region. Comrade, please let us use the chat box just to share expectations and the movements that we are representing. Amandla. I heard from Comrade Vava that Prof. Raft is amongst us as CFO. Our keynote speaker gets ready to take the floor to give us our keynote remarks. Prof. Raft, just your sense of the coalition, where we've come from, the solidarities over the years, and what's the significance of this platform as we reconsider once again the challenges in the region and what we can do together as a coalition. C4, as you get ready, Prof. Raft, your quick remarks. I can't hear him now, so let us move on. Let's move on. Our keynote is coming from Sifosami Malunga. It's going to, Prof was muted. If you can unmute quickly, and Sifo, so you can get ready also with your keynote. Prof, I think you're still muted. Muted. Technical, please help us. But in the meantime, Sifo, would you like to come through with the keynote remarks to set the tone for our engagement this morning?
Thank you very much, colleague. I'm really honored and privileged to have been asked to speak in this very critical meeting. I do not feel qualified to give a keynote. Those who know me will know I always decline when I'm told or asked to give a keynote address, because I feel completely inadequate to give a keynote address, particularly given the fact that you are on the front lines and you know better the context and the challenges in which you work. What I will do, though, is offer reflections of solidarity, my own reflections of some of what I'm seeing in the space, not just in the region, but beyond it, because what's happening beyond the region is having a huge impact and implication on the region itself. So we need to start off from the premise that because we are organizers and mobilizers, we are activists, we work to try to make change in our countries, in our communities, in our societies. We must work from the premise that those whose decisions we seek to change, those whose trajectories we seek to upend, also have organizing and mobilizing capabilities. And we've seen this in many instances. We're not the only ones who can organize. My friend Levi Kabwato likes to say tyranny organizes better. I'm not so sure, but because tyranny organizes on the back of power. So when you have power, you've got the ability to organize better. But the reality is that we must not assume that we are the only ones who have the capability to organize. So looking at the question of the civic space, one of the things we must accept and contend with is that we're not alone. And it's important to know that we're not alone, because knowing that we're not alone helps us understand that our challenges are not unique. They are important, they are critical, they are impactful to us, but they're not unique. Deterioration in the civic space is a global trend. It has been for a while, a long time. And the fact that it's a global trend means that we have many opportunities to see and learn how it is evolving. And I think it was one of the colleagues here said earlier that, these authoritarian regimes are learning from each other. But that also gives us fascinating and wonderful opportunities to also learn from each other in terms of how others are resisting this trend elsewhere. It has already been said, and I know that many colleagues will present, their own specific contexts later on. The point of deterioration is clear. So worldwide, there is absolutely no question that civil society organizations are reporting deterioration in the political climate as a starting point, in the limitation of individual freedoms and rights globally, and policy restrictions in the environment for CSOs to operate, and which is hindering their everyday work. Whether you are talking about in Turkey, in Russia, in Bangladesh. Well, Bangladesh has had an opening more recently. Hungary, we're talking about countries in the West here, or even in Latin America, Ecuador and other countries. And many countries are using arguments of national security, sovereignty, terrorism, etc., and using these to tighten legal regulations and scrutiny by CSOs. And of course, it's also making it increasingly difficult for civil society organizations or social movements in their countries to get funding from outside, because they figured out that if we regulate their ability to get funding, we can squeeze them to a point where they cannot function at all. And we can see this happening. This trend, they call it the shrinking global space. That's what they've been calling it. Shrinking or closing space for civil society. There are many other strategies that many of these governments have been utilizing to shrink the space that are not necessarily regulatory. So co-optation, for example, of civil society organizations or civic actors who are working out there either to hold governments accountable or who are providing services, supplementing the role of government in providing services. Some governments have figured that it's easier to just get them on our side, so we can co-opt them, we can use them, we can, whether by money or positions, or we can offer them different things, we can offer them some space, we can invite them to the State House, we can put them on a board, we can do this and that. So that's been one of the strategies. And it looks like fairly harmless, insidious, but it's a very powerful strategy that we've seen. And then, of course, the more brutal suppression of civil society that we've seen, using intimidation, violence, arrest, law enforcement, etc. One of the things we have to do, colleagues, is to analyze very carefully the instruments that and the mechanism that governments are using, to control and shape civil society, the civil society sphere. And the reason is that we are not going to be able to respond to something that we really do not intimately understand. It is one thing to scream, this has happened, this is what they are doing. It is completely another to be able to say, this is the theory behind what they are doing, this is their methodology, this is what they are intending to achieve, this is how they are intending to achieve it, and these are the different opportunities to counter these strategies, to push back on these policies, to hinder some of these programs that the government might have. And unless we are able to do that, we will continue to run behind and respond, in many instances quite unsuccessfully, to this plethora of strategies that the government that governments are coming up with. We must also contend with another reality, colleagues, that it is not only authoritarian regimes that are doing this. It is not only authoritarian regimes that are doing this. Ostensibly democratic regimes are also resorting to these tactics. And you see this in India, a place like India, for example, which is democratic, fairly, one of the largest democracies in the world, but hugely populist, very rabid, very insensitive to criticism, to alternative views, to minorities, and organizations that speak out and push for plurality in society and equality. And it leaves us a little bit baffled, because we say, well, authoritarian regimes are the ones that are doing this, but no, that is not true. Even democratic regimes are doing it. What they call hybrid regimes. One can argue that they're not really democratic if they do that, but the reality is that this phenomenon is spreading, and all regimes are willing and able to utilize these strategies. We must also accept and recognize that the state of civic space in Southern Africa mirrors what's happening in the globe, not the other way around. With a vast majority of people living under very severe restrictions on their fundamental freedoms in many of our countries. And we've got the live examples. Over 500, I stand to be corrected on the numbers, maybe 500, maybe even up to 1,000 people killed in Mozambique related to the recent election and the continuing turmoil in Mozambique. I don't even want to talk about elections. Somebody mentioned elections, contested, violent, manipulated elections in many of our countries. Whether it is Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, constant and consistent complaints about the manipulation of democratic processes, attacks against human rights activists, violent attacks, killings, intimidation, arrests. In many of our countries, more insidious but also more blatant forms of intimidation in many of our countries. These examples are well known to you because you live them. These are your lived realities, and there are common strategies globally, of course, but also in our region for regimes to curb the civic space from restrictive legislation, proliferation of restrictive legislation. A colleague said earlier when we opened that there's something happening in Malawi on that. I know a few years ago, we're pushing back on Mozambique, and more recently, Zimbabwe has passed this law, and it doesn't end. And of course, intimidation, as I said, of members of civil society and activists, restrictions on freedom of assembly, laws that restrict people meeting, organizing, assembling, protesting, and of course attacks on journalists and restrictions on freedom of expression are also a critical feature of the way in which regimes and governments in our region and globally are curbing the civic space. But what are we learning, comrades? What are we learning? Because we need to learn from what's happening so that we can strategize, to push back or to evade or to avoid some of these strategies. One point is that strategies to contain civil society are prevalent everywhere. Everyone is trying to do it. Every government, from authoritarian to democratic, is trying to do it. In one way or another, all governments feel threatened by the role of civil society in holding them accountable, in pointing out the challenges, in pointing out the failures, in pointing out the restrictions, in pushing for more democratic forms of governance, in pushing for accountability in the management of national and public resources, in pushing for openness in the political space, in pushing for freedom of information, in pushing for freedom of speech and expression. Not a single government is comfortable with it. And we've seen this. Trump in the US, completely intolerant. You'd never believe it, to a point where now the US is classified as not free by even Freedom House and others. But the point fundamentally is that this is a disease or a malady of all power, the intolerance to criticism. So almost all governments, as we say, are developing and utilizing strategies for containment. And these strategies are different. So we need to know who's doing what, where, and how. Authoritarian government approaches to containing civil society are not uniform, but collectively they represent a combination of measures. We all know their aim is to restrict the space as one point, especially, and we must be very careful because this is another strategy that authoritarian regimes have or undemocratic regimes have, to divide what you'd call the broader civil society. Because remember that the typology of us as civil society is very different. There's political civil society, politically active, even though one can then argue what's political, what's not. The reality is that any challenge that results and that impacts on power is inherently political. So if you're questioning the ability of governments to deliver healthcare, they say personal is political, political is personal. So even as I use the word political here, I'm using it, with caution. But the point fundamentally is that, there is a direct targeting of politically active civil society in many countries, while civil society organizations that might offer, service provision or what you'd call non-insidious policy analysis or other services that governments don't feel directly challenge them are allowed to function and even supported in many instances, and even co-opted by many of our governments. We have to accept another reality, comrades, that this approach also creates divisions between us. It's a strategy too, right? One can never argue, it would be impossible to argue that an organization that's fighting for health rights in, say, Malawi, that's pushing for sanitation, that's pushing for maternal health care, and in so doing is collaborating and coordinating with the Ministry of Health in order to make sure that these rights are realized for the majority of the people, whether in rural Malawi or urban. It is impossible to argue that that organization is reactionary. But we must understand that such an organization would use different strategies from an organization that's fighting for political and civil rights, completely different. But the point is that with those different typologies of organizations and different reactions by the government, this creates divisions between us. And this is something for us to think about. How do we navigate those divisions without letting them weaken us, without making us delegitimize the legitimate work that other organizations are actually doing and the strategies that they're actually adopting to be able to be effective? Because one must also think about the why, right? And we have to, as revolutionary, as radical as we are, we must also think about the bottom line, which is how do we make sure that our people are served, including in some instances collaborating. Say you sup with the devil. Are there instances where we must sup with the devil as a strategy? And these are fundamental questions, because I know how we have over the years become so averse to infiltration. We're so averse to this one is a state agent, this one is this one is that, and it's real and it's true, because one of the strategies of our government is to infiltrate the movement and do that. But the reality is that in more instances than none, it is almost impossible in many of the areas where we need to make a change, to do so without some form of collaboration, whether it is a strategic choice or whether it is an ideological one, or a complete betrayal of the struggle, whatever it might call it. So the other point I wanted to talk about, colleagues, is, you know, as I said earlier, obviously, it's not just the authoritarian or anti-democratic regimes that are organizing. It's also civil society. And the pushback by civil society is also a global trend. And we have to keep an eye on what's happening globally. So we have to always raise our heads. We have to always raise our heads and see what's happening elsewhere. Not so much because it's interesting, but because it might offer us useful insights of how we might want to co-opt some of those lessons in our own struggles and our own strategies. So the pushback is also global. CSO responses across different contexts are also varied, but there are some commonalities around that. So they range between attempts, you know, to push back on the policy environment, to stop laws being passed. That's a very common strategy. To stop laws, to stop restrictive policies being passed, mobilize society, push back, mobilize parliamentarians, mobilize international community. That's a common strategy across. You know, to respond to attempts to curtail the civic space. One strategy has been to comply. That's a strategy. Some civil society organizations have said, look, you know, we'll try to comply because otherwise we can't function at all. And I know that that's one of the contentions that many of our comrades in Zimbabwe are trying to figure out. How do you comply with this horrible piece of legislation, this draconian law on civil society that restricts it? So, but the reality is you comply or you die. You adapt or you perish in that context, or you have to find other more strategic ways to continue to function. So that's one strategy. The other has been subversive advocacy. How do you adapt your strategy to completely to undercut, to criticize, to undermine these efforts? You know, that these authoritarian regimes are coming up with. It's a strategy, one of the strategies, and it's a global one too. And we see it a lot in Latin America. How do you get around, in terms of organizing, how do you get around formal organizations where you have an address, a registration? How do you introduce spontaneity in your responses to governmental action, for example? Spontaneity that has no leader, that has no figurehead, that has no traceability, that has no address. How do you protest? For example, leaderless protests, as we see now in Kenya, a fascinating strategy, even though, of course, the authoritarian regimes or anti-democratic regimes will always have still strategies to respond to those. But the reality is that there are so many different ways. Or how do you just simply withdraw from participating, if you've been collaborating or cooperating with the government on a particular issue, whether it's a constitutional reform process or a legal reform process, and you feel that the direction it is taking is not, you know, democratic, is not progressive. Some civil society organizations or some civic actors are simply withdrawing. That's a reaction to that, withdrawing from collaborating or cooperating with the government. And then, of course, I talked about overt protests. And then, of course, one of the more common ones has been appealing to others for support, appealing to the international community, appealing to regional bodies, appealing to other governments, appealing to neighboring governments to prevail upon. And this has been a critical strategy. I know Crisis has done this a lot, to say, SADC, please, and this is part of what we're talking about, right? The SADC heads of states are meeting, and the advocacy around, you know, how can we persuade these leaders to take a different path? Whether it's a successful strategy or not, we've done it for quite a while. We'll have to figure out and decide at some point. So, in short, reactions are varied. You know, either you you comply, you withdraw, or you resist. There are only three possibilities. You comply, you withdraw, or you resist. And we've seen service-related CSOs that provide basic services, health, education, etc., more likely to comply, and rightly so. It's not a moral debate. Maybe it is, but it's not. It's a practical one. How can we, even as activists, expect that because the government passes a draconian legislation in a country, organizations working to put children in school must also stop working? It is a nonsensical expectation. So, and I'm putting this on the table. I know it's controversial for some, but I'm putting it on the table, colleagues, because one of my recommendations is going to be rethinking what solidarity really means, and rethinking what an ecosystem really is, and fighting divisions in the sector. There is absolutely, I've already said that government as a strategy will co-opt some and not, but there's no reason for divisions to exist between civil society organizations that provide direct services, public services to our communities and our citizens and our societies, and those that push for policy reform, action, etc., and that are more politically active. Because at the end of the day, the foundation for both is the same. It is respectful, dignified lives for our people. And we have to rethink and go back to this, comrades. And I know that we will say, no, those ones, they're collaborating, therefore. But part of what we need to, and I'll say this later as I'm just about to finish now, in reconnecting with our base, the grassroots, the people, in re-energizing the constituency, we cannot ignore these, because these are the things that matter to them. The ability for their children to access school matters to our people. The ability of our people to access healthcare matters. And whoever is doing that matters to them and should matter to us. So, it's an important point. It might not seem so, but we do know. I will explain why I'm talking about it in this way. So we have to let me because I think I've gone on for a bit long. Let me see if I can just land now. I'll skip a few of the things I wanted to say. And say, what we've seen, colleagues, is that no matter how bad things may seem, and no matter how difficult and hopeless a situation might be, what we have seen consistently, not just in our region, but everywhere, I'll give examples in our region shortly, is that nothing is permanent, and especially authoritarian repression. We have seen that even in the midst of severe crackdown, whether it is in Colombia, whether it is in Venezuela, whether it is in Guatemala, whether it is in Chile, what we have seen is that consistent and persistent resistance will at some point invariably and inevitably lead to a change. And the only reason why it leads to a change is because it is consistent and persistent. Because the moments for change will come when you sometimes least expect them. And I'm saying this not just to make you feel good, not just to make you feel, oh, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, but you don't know when the moment is coming. And if the moment comes when you've decided to put down your arms, if the moment comes when you've decided, it's enough, you will miss that moment. And what we have seen is that the moment and the trigger can be anything. It can be literally anything. So what am I saying? We must organize, colleagues, and not agonize. We must organize and not agonize. Tajuddin, this is, I should attribute this to Tajuddin, the great Pan-Africanist brother. He said, don't agonize, organize. I know we're organizing. I don't want to seem like I'm saying you're not organizing. But we must organize for the moment and for the changing circumstances. As I said, my brother Tulani Masego said, nothing is permanent. Not repression, not democracy, nothing is permanent. There is no situation that is permanent. Ian Smith said, not in 1,000 years will Zimbabweans have majority rule. Where is Ian Smith? What happened to Rhodesia? So the reality, the South African apartheid regime never thought they would ever lose power, but what happened to them? The ANC never thought there would be a government of national unity. What happened to them? The geriatrics in Lesotho never thought that there would be a new government. What happened to them? What happened to the ruling party in Zambia and MMD and PP? And so you see what's happening. You look at some of these countries and you think these things can never change. Zambia has had 4 or 5 different political parties changing, power, taking power, opposition. What happened in Malawi? Did you ever think MCP would lose power? Did you ever think MCP would come back to power? So what I'm saying, comrades, is that yes, it might look like it's hopeless. It might look like it's not going to change, but it will. That's just a reality. The question is, when it does, when the opportunity for change comes, where are you going to be? Are you going to be in a position to seize the moment and shape the trajectory of that change? Or will you be sitting somewhere already having given up, enabling and allowing what happened in Zimbabwe in 2017 to happen, which is a change of simply a cosmetic change? And we've seen this. Malawi, we've had change. Zambia, we've had change. Botswana, we had change. Lesotho, we had change. In Zimbabwe, too, we've had successful resistance. Prof. Rafti will remember this, and many of you might have been part of this struggle when the pushback against the constitution, the shifts, with all elections in Zimbabwe consistently, and I will argue this wherever I'm able to, all elections in Zimbabwe have, since actually 1980, have been manipulated in one way or another. And most of, at least for the past 4 or 5 elections, have been won by the opposition, in my opinion. And there's sufficient evidence of that. So why would we say the moment for change in Zimbabwe is not coming? It is. It is coming. And the evidence is that the effort and the mobilization of people is sufficient enough to continue to push. The people want change, and that's possibly, in the end, I guess, the greatest asset to us as movements, as civil society. The people already want change. We're not trying to make them want something. We're not trying to politically conscientize them. They want change. They need change. They know that the way things are is not right, and they want things to change. The challenge is they just don't know when, how, because the counter forces are so strong, and we have to figure out how to weaken them. That's part of what it is. How we have to figure out what kind of alliances, including with people in government as well, we need to develop to try to shift, the trajectory. A couple more points, then I'll stop. So I've already said we need to better understand authoritarian strategies and how to counter them. And to do that, we need to learn from them. We need to reconnect with the masses, colleagues. We need to reconnect with the people we ostensibly are fighting to serve. I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying we are not. But we have to also contend with the reality that we do have crisis of legitimacy too. We do. And some of this has been exacerbated in more recent times by our friends in the US saying that, some of the funders that supported some of the work that we've done have used us as Trojan horses to overthrow governments, to do this and that, completely ignoring the fact that our struggles are real, completely ignoring the fact that our grievances are born out of lived realities. We live in these communities where there's no medicines in hospitals, where people are bludgeoned and killed during electoral periods, where people are abducted. This is not our efforts to create rights-respecting societies and governments is not born out of the fact that we have a grant from USAID. These governments are doing this with or without grants from USAID. They are doing this because they are just not willing to tolerate any opposition. So the reality, but we must also contend with the fact that even from a public perspective, our credibility, our legitimacy has been dented over time as well, but also by narratives and propaganda that, okay, this organization, foreign agents, this one, foreign agents. We know that that is not the case, but we also know that these are some of the tags that come with being supported and funded. But we also know that even our foreign funders do have agendas. And ours is a battle to manage this very carefully, to decide whether it's worth it to receive support from a particular funder, an outside or foreign funder, or not. Knowing the importance and the essence of funding in the struggle, understanding that it is important to be able to travel to places, it is important to organize, it is important to feed people, it is important to pay expenses to do certain things. We know nothing is free, but we must also ask ourselves fundamentally, is it worth that? Is it worth the erosion or the complete decimation of legitimacy, our own legitimacy, and whose agenda then? And because there's a cost in terms of perceptions as well, as our people see, those ones, look, they're driving nice cars, they get money, we know we don't get anything. Of course, they'll get arrested. They're getting arrested so that they can get more money, etc. I know these stereotypical, arguments that we hear, but we must not ignore them, comrades. As we hear them, we must not say, people are crazy. We must engage those by getting closer to the people so that the people understand and know. Because even during the liberation struggle, our people understood that they had to contribute $2, $1, so that the political activists could travel around the country. They knew that. Or they could contribute their cars. Business people during that time would give their vehicles to political leaders to use for free. They would give their houses, they would give accommodation, they would give food, they would do all sorts of things. And many of our communities would feed our liberation fighters and our guerrillas in the bush. Those were efforts of our people to connect and support the struggle in ways that they could. And we need to get back to that point where we have that clear connection with people, where they also understand that it is in their interest to support the work that we do. So, and that was my next point, reconnecting with the masses. I've already spoken about how we can do this. We also need to reproduce our leadership, colleagues. We need to reproduce our leadership. And what am I saying here? You look at Kenya right now. None of the people that we see on TV in Kenya, well, are people we know. Well, they're known in Kenya because some of them they're new. We don't know those people. We know the Boniface Mwangi's, yes, Boniface Mwangi's are still there. Irungu Hautons are still there. Willie are still there, people like Willie, but you can see what's happening in Kenya now. They're retreating and the new generation is advancing. We need to reproduce our leadership. And the reason is a simple one, it's an imperative. 70 to 80% of our populations are below the age of 50, 40, 45, 35. Hey, if there's anything, and this is what's happening to the region, and that's why many of these liberation movements are losing power, and they will all lose power eventually. And soon, actually, not even eventually. Because the people that are now voting have no idea of that movement, liberation movement. They don't care. They don't care about it, but they care about it, but their lived reality is, I went to university, I got a degree, I have no job. Full stop. I can't afford a job, I can't afford a car, I can't afford a house. I'm still living in my mother's house, I'm living in my father's house, and they resent everything, including us, who are their mothers and fathers, for not having done more to make sure that they need not be living with us. So what am I saying? We need to step back and create spaces for new leaders to emerge. In our movements, colleagues, I know it's difficult, and I know it sounds contradictory to what I said earlier, which was we need to stay the course, but creating spaces for leadership is not withdrawing entirely. It is creating spaces for new leadership that connects with the masses, and the masses are young people right now. They're younger people. It is not us. So we have to find a way to do that, knowing our attachment, ideological, practical, to the struggle, understanding all this and understanding the difficulty of letting go. We have to find a way and ways to do that. And the penultimate point, we need solidarity. We need to understand that when people are under severe forms of oppression, their ability to fight is completely constrained, and in many instances, even destroyed. And the only way they can continue sometimes is to have solidarity and support from others. History is clear about the value and the power of solidarity. Apartheid would never have been ended without solidarity, not just continental, but global solidarity. Colonialism would never have ended without solidarity. Within the continent as well. The Pan-African movements, the Organization of African Unity, and all the movements, the non-aligned movement, all these movements that provided solidarity to pockets of resistance to tyranny, to racial minority rule, to whatever authoritarian rule. That still stands today. We have to double up on solidarity. We must stand and support each other, especially when there are crackdowns in different countries. That is a non-negotiable point. I always say solidarity is the fuel of any struggle. You need it. You need that fuel to continue to struggle. And solidarity should go across, not just in Africa. The people of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, we should stand up for and with people who are fighting to regain their dignity, to reclaim their rights, wherever they may be, because it's the same, colleagues. there's absolutely no difference with Trump rounding up, Mexicans and throwing them out. We can't be happy with that. We cannot have solidarity with the people of Gaza and say, no, our struggle is in Southern Africa. My goodness, have you seen Gaza? If you think of Gaza now, you think, my goodness, we thought we had a problem. We thought we had it worse. The people of Gaza, my God, we must associate with those struggles. We cannot be quiet, because what are we saying about ourselves and the ideological thrust of our struggles if we're going to keep quiet about those things and only complain about the PVO Act or complain about what's happening in Mozambique or in Swaziland? We must complain about that. We must push back about that, but we must also show solidarity. And part of showing solidarity means that we will also get solidarity from others. So it's actually symbiotic. It's not just a one-way street. And I said my last point is we need to sit down and think, how have we been pushing back? What has been our strategy to push back until now? We've been advocacy against these laws, protests maybe, appealing to the international community maybe, appealing to these leaders at the SADC summit maybe, mobilizing people maybe, law reform maybe. We need to look carefully at all our strategies, adapt them. We need to adapt existing strategies to new forms of repression, new strategies of closure of civic space. And to do that, we need to look outside and see what others are doing. How are others adapting? Taking into account that our situations may be unique, but we need to adapt, colleagues. We can't keep doing the same things. We can't do the same things that have not worked, especially when authoritarian regimes are themselves adapting. And we need to develop new forms, new strategies of organizing. We need to take advantage of the new opportunities that are presented to us to organize and mobilize. Once upon a time, you needed to traverse the entire country. You needed to go, if you are here, for example, you would need to get into a car and go all the way to Eastern Cape and then go all the way to KZN, to Mpumalanga, to Limpopo. You need to drive physically to go and reach those communities. Not anymore. Now, you can reach those communities via technology. Granted that many of our countries have different access and different levels of access to technology and connectivity, and therefore, especially for rural communities, and therefore that as a strategy might not be as effective in some countries than it may be in others. The reality is that, colleagues, we have tools, new tools, emerging tools. And as long as we have young people comprising the majority of actors that we are hoping and seeking to mobilize, these tools remain potent tools. And guess what? Our governments know it. They know it and they understand it. And that's why they're on social media. That's why they're there. That's why they're hiring trolls. That's why they're hiring dozens and dozens of young people who are technically savvy to create and paint narratives and push these narratives on media, social media, because it's immediate, it's quick, it's far-reaching, but it's also an important point of disinformation, misinformation. We need to be in that space, in that particular space, utilizing it for ourselves as a tool for organizing. That's one, just one. There's many others. And as countries adopt the dreaded Starlink, we need to see that not all is wrong and bad. Starlink is Elon Musk. We all have our views about Elon Musk. But the reality is that Starlink opens up our countries. It's a paradox. Starlink makes our rural areas accessible. It allows us to give counter narratives to what the government has been giving to our rural folk. We need to get into that pipeline where we're also able to push those messages across. Because now even a granny or a gogo who is 60 has a phone, can get in and can know what the news is. They don't have to listen to Malawi television broadcasting only, or Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation only. There's WhatsApp channels, there's all sorts of others, and Twitter and so on. Comrades, I have to stop here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect with you. I know that as you have been resilient, you will continue to be, and you will seize the opportunities as you have before. You know, in the past 5-6 years, as I say, our countries, 5 or 6 of our countries have seen democratic transitions. That's a fact, you know, with a change of governments. So it's not a gloom and doom. It's bad, but it's not gloom and doom. It means that, but then there are some strongholds which are not shifting. And I think it's in good time as we persist and continue to fight and push back and adapt and get more solidarity and adjust and reconnect with the masses. Those changes are coming to those countries. Thank you.
Viva, viva, consistent, persistent, resistance, viva solidarity, viva leadership, reproduction, viva new forms of organizing, viva the crisis coalition, viva Comrades C4. What a masterclass, comrades. We are well enriched. You touched all the bases. You set us off to a solid discussion, especially as you said, need to get back to the basics. That is to building a critical mass to our people. That is to answering the day-to-day bread and butter questions to which our democratic systems must be answering, but are not today. Comrades, this set us off well into the crux of our meeting. That is how we may re-energize our understanding of the situation.
Hi, Comrade Fambai. Are you there?
And we are coming to
Sorry, we lost you
share
there.
and enrich this process. But listen,
We lost you for a minute or two.
solidarity on the one hand, but to also put on the table practical, so that as we deploy. Can you hear me, comrades? Zimbabwean internet.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm
You may need to take us back a little bit to the last 2 minutes or 1.
It was just my excitement at the presentation. What I need now, maybe just 1 or 2 comrades to come in and just, receive these words of wisdom, so that we carefully harvest. I've harvested a lot as well. And then from there, we'll receive our solidarities and our interventions from comrades around the region. We have quite a long lineup. So maybe can I have two quick ones? Comrade Levy, Kabacho, you're here. Prof. Raft, you were going to say something. So can I have just 2 quick ones? Ladies and someone also to come in. I'm seeing so many ladies who can, not amongst the speakers, who can also receive the wisdom. So Prof. Raft, if you can give us your quick take, just to harvest really.
Thank you very much.
Comrade Levy.
Greetings to all our old friends and colleagues. Thanks to Sipo for a very insightful presentation. I think he's covered all the grounds here that are necessary. The changes in the conditions of civil society at national level, particularly the restructuring of our economies, which has informalized our economies and caused the demolition of those former structures which were able to provide civil society with activism. The demolition of opposition parties, not only through state interventions, but through strategic mistakes by the opposition themselves, which have been persistently done. And then the global, very saddening global situation where we've seen the rise of the global right, which has been going on for some time now, and the implications for that. So I think the challenges are very clear, and more than ever, we need a critical internal assessment of the state of civil society, of opposition forces, of national, regional, and global politics in order to understand the new interventions that need to take place. I think that SIPO has set out very good. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Power. Thank you, Prof. Amandla. Strong Harvest Day. Comrade Levy, if you can come in also to receive the wisdom. Comrade Vuyokas, if you can.
You're putting me on the spot, Comrade Farah.
Yes,
But I think there's nothing much that one can say after Dr. Malunga and Prof. Rafti have spoken. Safe to say this question that the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition has done so well, the question of solidarity in times of struggle, just to buttress that point and really to insist that this is something that we must continue to take forward. There are so many struggles that the coalition has lended itself to Mozambique, Malawi, throughout the region. They've demonstrated very solid capacity in standing with others who have also stood with us with our protracted crisis in Zimbabwe, as it were. So we must never tire. We must always stay the course. And as Sipo says, we don't know when change is coming, and the moment could happen at any given time, and we must be ready for that. So solidarity forward ever. Thank you, Comrade Fambai.
Amava, I like that. You don't know when that moment will come. And the critical thing is for us to remain in position, to remain steeped in solidarity, to harness our collective capacity so that when that moment comes, really we can make a difference. Comrade Vuyokazi, I'm putting you on the spot. Would you like to come in? And after that, we get on to the regional solidarity messages. I'm beginning with Comrade Josephine from the DRC. Next up, Comrade Sakile, and then Comrade Sheila from Mozambique. Comrades, if you can be ready. What we really want to do is to get a sense of what is happening in the struggle in your areas, so that we know what kind of solidarity you need and what kind of solidarity we can also expect from all of us who are gathered on this call, on this meeting, really to revitalize a regional solidarity front in the SADC. Comrade Vuyo, are you able? If not, yes, come and come.
Hi, comrade. Let me rather reserve my I'll piggyback first on the previous speaker that reflected to say, I don't think there's anything anyone can say after Sipo has spoken. Perhaps this is the second time I've had to encounter his wisdom. I'm sorry if your pronouns are not his, and Prof as well. So let me rather preserve my comments and my observation and reflections up to after the speakers have spoken, because I think they're going to touch on critical issues that affect South Africa and what does solidarity look like for us in the context of what the speaker is going to say about xenophobic violence and etc. etc.
Viva. And that's the question indeed, comrade. What does solidarity look like for all of us engaged on the ground in different struggles. So yes, we wrap up this introductory moment where we're just getting a sense of the task at hand, what needs to happen, what we need to look out for, especially in this context where the space is shrinking for the purposes of extending repression and the oppression of our people. And indeed, I like this one. Combs, if you're on a roll there, he said, it's an absurd choice to either comply, withdraw, or resist. I'm sure that we on the solidarity persuasion are more likely to choose the option of resistance, knowing full well that as we resist, we will get some solidarity. Comrade Jos, Dr. Jos, I hope you are ready now. We'll hear from Comrade Jos, reflections from the DRC, and also their sense of where they are on the regional democratic question, the challenges that they're meeting, and what we as a solidarity platform, as a crisis in Zimbabwe coalition, can do to support. Dr. Jos, the floor is yours.
Dear colleague, thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. I'm Josephine Maua from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm working with a peace center called Centre de Paix Genève. Please allow me to close my camera so that I will be very sure that the network won't disturb.
That's okay, Doc. And you have 3 minutes, my doc, please.
3 minutes. You said 10. Okay, I will do my best.
Thank you.
Can I share the slide?
You might need to do it without the slides.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. If this is not working, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay. I will be speaking about the failing governance in Western country, which is the DRC, and human rights violation in civic space. Let me say that the protracted war and violence of almost 30 years have revealed the state of governance in DRC. The persistence of violence is understood as the result of a weak state and failing governance, especially the governance of security. This refers to the constellation of institutions, whether they are formal or informal, that provide for social control and conflict resolution to promote peace in the face of threat. Some indicators showing the failure of performing basic functions such as education, security, or governance, usually due to fractious violence, weak institution, which also determine the state of the DRC. So in the current presentation, I will just focus on the context of this weak governance, which is related to the protracted war and the failing governance in a fragile and weak state. In the context, we have at least 2 or 3 things that we have just to have in mind. The first thing is that the Eastern Congo is extremely rich in important mineral that are essential to the production of batteries and other electronic components. Now we have those our rebels group, especially M23, that is supported by Rwanda and Uganda, that is after control of those raw materials since the beginning of the war. So that's why we can see occasionally or the reemergence of rebellion in the eastern part of Congo. So this current escalation started in 2021 up to present is destabilizing the eastern part of Congo. So this context is the outcome of a weak, fragile state and the failing governance, which causes in turn grave violation of human rights. So when we talk about failing governance, we see, we just talk about some of them who are related directly to war issue. We have the issue of natural resources. With natural resources, there is issue of corruption and lack of transparency. There is also complicity of state officials in illegal resources business. We have also the issue of political fragility. There is tension between politicians in the region. There's also this weakness of military operation. DRC is big, but when we see the number of military, we have 134,000 personnel, which is weak compared to what the DRC is going through. So we have many challenges related to the failing of the governance, which are also like democratic accountability, high level of corruption, acute lack of financing for development effort. Regarding human rights violation and atrocity, this is a nightmare in DRC, especially the eastern part of Congo. When we talk about the death or killing or mass killing, the mass killing has just become like our daily bread. In 2023, there was a mass killing of at least 56 people, and others like 80 were injured, and others were arbitrarily arrested, over 150 people. In 2024, this year, in January, we have the report of at least 774 death cases. We have 2,088 cases of people who were injured, or at least. And we have over 70 bodies that were discovered inside a Protestant church. This year, we had in a village the case of 200 people who were killed in one night. Last week, we had the case of 41 people who were killed in a church, followed by 13 people who were killed in the bar. So the daily assassinations, kidnapping, this is just our daily bread. So we don't even count those ones, because every day you wake up, there is a body found somewhere. There is a body found. So it's just overwhelmed. We are just overwhelmed with this issue of assassination. There's also issue of sexual violence that is also dramatic. In 2023, we have the report of over 120,000 cases of sexual violence. This year, we have around 500 cases of sexual violence that were reported within 1 week following M23 invasion, with more than 150 cases of children that were sexually assaulted. This year, we had in January, following the M23 invasion, we had at least 165 female prisoners who were raped before being burned in the prison. And we have recurrent cases of rape and sexual violence in the country. We have also issue of sexual violence in IDP camps. This is just West. In January, since January, for example, we have over 100,000 people who fled the country because of this M23 war. 400,000 have been displaced in North and South Kivu. So regarding the case of sexual violence in the camp, we have the case of 153 sexual violence cases. This is in 2023. In North Kivu, we have 733 cases of sexual violence in the camp of IDPs. We also have issue of security and terrorist attack. In 2021, we had cases of 260 security incidents. In 2022, we had 293 security incidents. We also had the same year the attack on human rights workers. We had the case of 387 human rights defenders and 67 journalists that were targeted with threats of physical violence. We have this year, 2025, attack on infrastructures. We have 5,927 schools that are closed, resulting in at least 2 million children with no access to education. We have some 33 health facilities in North Kivu and 15 facilities in South Kivu that have been destroyed. This year, we have the case of several peacekeepers with the UN and Southern African missions, including that were attacked. We have at least also like 14 soldiers from South Africa that died during the attack. So regarding the action taken, there are many things that are happening, but what we don't understand is why the war does not end. Because at international level, we have action, regional level, we have action, international level, we have judiciary and diplomatic initiative. With diplomatic initiative, we have those Doha 1, Doha 2, US peace agreement, which for me, it sounds just like those politicians are just playing around people, and they don't do anything that can help the country to advance the peace process. So at regional level, we do have many initiatives like the political and diplomatic. We have the Nairobi process, we have the Angola, we have also the support of SADC mission in the country, but still, we don't see if we will go somewhere. Locally, we also have some initiative. We have like inter-religious dialogue and meeting between religious leaders from Catholic Church, Protestant, Muslim, who met the President Tshisekedi and the M23 leaders for a possibility of negotiating. We have also humanitarian actions. Here we have international humanitarian organizations that have been responding in DRC since the beginning of war in 1999. We also have some human rights protection, but this is not like practical. What we need from yes, this is the last one. Okay. So we need the support from you guys, our fellow Southern African Region Civil Society organization, at least 4 points. The first one is the advocacy to prevent sexual violence and the gender-based violence, as well as the accountability of perpetrators. The second thing is the involvement in efforts to improve respect for human rights, especially support for program against child exploitation. We also have, we need support to call on the DRC government and rebel to ensure a safe working space and protection for human rights defenders. And last, we need your support to advocate, to pressure the UN Department of Peace and Peace Operation to promptly investigate the role played by MONUSCO and its leadership in the event that led to the murder and the mass killing of religious group in Goma. Thank you so much.
Viva Comrade Maua, viva solidarity forever, solidarity long-standing with the suffering people of the DRC, people suffering because of their own resources. Comrade, that was heartbreaking and very touching. The killings must stop. The imperialism must stop. And the people of Congo must regain mastery over their resources and their government. The solidarity requests, comrades, are well noted. Advocacy on sexual and gender-based violence, promotion and respect of the human rights, safe space for human rights defenders, an overall end to the war. We said an investigation into the MONUSCO role in the mass killings. Yes, those are well noted, and we stand in solidarity. And I think these are asks and demands that we need to press when we engage with SADC leaders. May we move on from the DRC? Comrades, also let's use the chat box. Let's use the chat box as well to note, to comment, and also to buttress some of the points that are being raised, since we'll not all get a moment or a chance to speak. Comrade Sakile, are you ready to come through? Your solidarity remarks, your sense of the context, but more especially where you need our solidarity, and what solidarity also the coalition can expect from you. 5 minutes, Com, if you can take the floor. After that, Comrade Sheila from Mozambique, to be your 10. Thereafter, Comrade Rashi, Comrade Mahia, Amandla, to be your 10. Yes. Comrade Saki, I see you're loading something, but I'm not seeing any, not enough on the chat box. Comrades, let us make use of the chat box. Yes. Comrade Sakile, are you there? Or
sorry.
Am I?
Yeah, he's in now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Comrade Fambai. I will be very short and brief because of time. Always when I'm given such platform, I get to be facing challenges of time. Nonetheless, I was given to reflect particularly on what is happening in Swaziland and what is the situation of human rights defenders in Swaziland. At the same time, what kind of solidarity that us as the people of Swaziland can really appreciate from such regional body that is working with different organizations from the region of SADC and the world in general. I think, comrades, firstly, I will introduce myself. I'm Sakile Ngamiso Ngumalo, a leader of young people in Swaziland working with a different organization within Swaziland and outside of this country. I think comrades may know that we remain the only country that is led by an absolute monarch, where the king is the head of government, the king is the head of parliament, the king is the head of everything that is taking place in this country. Comrades will know that we are having a king that have 15 wives. The other 2 of them decided to exile themselves. Without forgetting, I think it's 2 of them that have passed on, which means in total, the king of Swaziland have had about 19 wives. All his wives are not working anywhere, and they have never worked anywhere, but they are the ones that controls the means of production in the country. I'm raising these comrades to show comrades that our situation is different, particularly from other struggles that we've seen in the SADC region, where comrades, many comrades in the region are complaining about elections that are repressed. For us, in Swaziland, the political parties have been banned since 1973. The last elections that had political parties participating in were in 1971. And after that, there have never been elections in the country where the people of Swaziland have a right to participate through political parties and also a representation through political organizations. So it has been a fiefdom of the king who decide, or individuals or even business people that have abilities and aspect to be able to be part and parcel. Only the rich can be members of parliament because they are able to fund themselves, they are able to do everything. But it's just an overview, comrades, because of time. I think comrades will remember that 2021 in Swaziland, the reason why we are still calling our country, comrades, we've emphasized, we have even seen in such spaces where we are being called Eswatini, we are not yet Eswatini as the people of Swaziland. It's because of one reason, comrades. The country name change was done in the bedroom of the king alone, wheresoever he was, and he wake up on his birthday and just change the name of the country. May the soul of our human rights lawyer, Comrade Tulan Maseko, rest in peace. He died. There was still a court case that he was issuing to say the king had no right to change the name of the country without following the rightful procedures and the processes of changing a name of a country. So we still insist and persist with comrades that they must continue using Swaziland, because that name itself was reflecting that the land of the country belonged to the Swazi people. So this thing of changing it to something else that we have never agreed in upon the people, as the people of Swaziland, was still totally against it. And that is why we remain the people of Swaziland, comrades. So I think, comrades, remember 2021, what happened, the king decided to butcher a number of people, about 150 young people were butchered in 2021. And we've buried these young people, not necessarily, comrade, that we are speaking this from the air. It's something that we have touched and witnessed, and some of us were part and parcel of many funerals of these young people. So up to this day, the country authority have not been able to take forward even the human rights commission of the country that is also a watchdog. That was supposed to be a watchdog in making sure that it whips the regime from time to time, have failed dismally so to partake in issues of compensation of our comrades that either lost a loved one, or some of them, they have bullets in their bodies, some of them, they have been cut off their limbs, and some of them, they have permanent scars. The government of the time have even failed to compensate them, or to even discuss issues of compensation, because they have even not yet discussed the element to say there was serious massacre that took place in 2021. So fast forward, comrades, I think comrades have seen that the current king have just decided to allow Swaziland to be a dumping site of criminals from the United States of America. A very touching situation to us, because these criminals that have also been sent, particularly to Swaziland, they have been said they are criminals that have done severe criminal issues of rape, issues of human trafficking, and whatsoever. It really touches us as human rights defenders, because if you check, even within the statutory element of the regime, the processes were not literally followed in terms of taking these criminals to Swaziland. It's only issues of economic benefits to the royal family. It's also economic of accumulation from the royal family. It's beyond issues of making Swaziland whatsoever. It's issues of the king wants to accumulate more, and the monies that are involved in issues of taking criminals that are coming from the United States of America. So it's issues that we are saying as the people of Swaziland, we have been raising, that we reject this thing and we are totally against it. I think comrades will also know that we've got many young people that are in the prisons of Umswat. These young people are not necessarily given bails. We got plus or minus 47 young people who are charged with terrorism, sedition, and also murder, because of what transpired on 2022, where the people of Swaziland stood up and said enough is enough, and they were trying to resist the regime from its oppression and whatsoever. Then about 47 young people are in the prisons of Umswat, and these young people are not even allowed to be seen. They are not allowed to be seen by lawyers. They are not allowed to be seen by their loved ones. They have been detained, some of them, since 2022. They have not even been shown their faces in the courts of the land. We got two prominent people that I think comrades may even know. They were members of parliament that stood firm against the regime and say the issue of Swaziland, it must come to an end, to say the people of Swaziland must have a certain reforms within the state. So these two members of parliament have been in prison, and they've been convicted, by the way, comrades, and been sentenced to, in total, both of them, to 186 years in total, which means one of them is 80-something, the other one is 60-something years in prison. And they will be serving all these years in prison. Even the Supreme Court of the land, it seems to not be opening its ears in terms of listening what these members of parliament have been applying to say the sentence must be reduced and whatsoever. So under these circumstances where the regime is repressing everything, in the space of civic organization, I think comrades may know, like any other countries that are within the SADC region, the issue of closing the space of organizing, particularly for us in Swaziland, has been high these days. The regime have closed even to petition the government offices is something that is extremely impossible now. Civic organizations that used to be able to organize from different communities, they have made sure that for anything that is coming to assist the people of Swaziland, outside fundings whatsoever, it must go through the treasury of the government and make sure and see and have some report and APC and FHA. There's a lot of things that are happening in the country just to make sure that they suppress and repress totally and what is happening in Swaziland. And also, comrades, before I get cut by comrades comrades, we got so many young people that are in exile in South Africa and also other neighboring states in Swaziland. These young people now, which is a challenge to us, and we are seeking solidarity from you, comrades. They are handpicked, particularly in South Africa, and then taken back to Swaziland. What used to happen in apartheid time? We got 3 people that were picked in Rustenburg and then were brought back to Swaziland. And as we speak, they are in the maximum prison in Matsapa. So there are still many that are being picked day in and day. Some of them, they're even killed in exile. And it looked like they're killed by criminals is only to discover that is the regime that have escaped to other foreign lands to kill our comrades that are in exile. So we are seeking solidarity, comrades, to take our comrades, if possible, even outside of Africa, to be in spaces where they are going to be safe, in spaces where they are going to be safe and continue organizing. I think Comrade Fambaya will end there and I will come back where there will be opportunity.
Viva, comrade. Powerful, powerful. Indeed, Abasha, monarchism, Abasha, repression, Abasha, the imprisonment and the exiling of voices of dissent, Abasha, human rights oppression that you so roundly assess. We can't forget the situation in Swaziland, the last remaining absolute monarchy in this day and age. And we can't forget also the atrocities of 2021, even as we refuse to forget our fallen comrade and leader, Comrade Thulani Maseko. Indeed, may he so rest in peace. So, comrades, we've heard of the situation in Eswatini, the solidarity requests from our comrades in Eswatini, in Swaziland, yes, in Swaziland. We've heard, comrades, that we still have prisoners of conscience, not only one or a few, but prisoners, 7 prisoners of conscience, 2 parliamentarians sentenced to 186 years for standing up for democracy and justice. It is wrong and it is worthy of our solidarity. So those solidarity requests are well noted. The plight of human rights defenders in exile, well noted. The closure of space, well noted. That is why we are here, to fan the flames of resistance and to give each other solidarity. Yes, that was Swaziland. Comrade Sheila, Mozambique, the floor is yours. It looks like 5 minutes is not working, maybe 8 or so, but at least if you can go until 11:30. Comrade Sheila, your remarks from Mozambique, the situation.
Okay.
Yes, come through.
Thank you for inviting me to share the state of governance, civic space, and human rights in Mozambique. The situation is in Mozambique, it's not different as most of the countries in Africa. So Mozambique is facing serious challenges to democracy, civic freedoms, and human rights. While the country has held multi-party elections since 1994, political power remains highly centralized, and recent developments show growing tensions between the government and opposition in Mozambique. So civic space is shrinking, and we also have an armed conflict in the northern part of the country that continues to threaten the stability and the protection of basic rights in the country. We had general elections last year that were marked by fraud, intimidation of voters, and also manipulation of the final results. And opposition parties and independent observers reported many cases of ballot stuffing and lack of transparency in the vote counting. Following the elections, protests erupted in several cities, met with a heavy response from the police, leading to arrest and violence against demonstrators. We, or I can say, civil society organizations report more than 400 people killed during these protests by the police. More of 1,000 of people were arrested, many of them still in prison without a trial so far. So this post-election crisis has deepened political division. There were some efforts to resolve these disputes through a dialogue have stalled, and trust in electoral institutions has fallen further.
Decentralization promised in 2019 peace agreement has not been fully implemented, with the central government maintaining strong control over local governance. This is regarding the governance in the country, but we also have armed conflict in the northern part of Mozambique. But most of the cases of killings and kidnappings are registered in the province of Cabo Delgado, where the conflict continues between insurgent groups and government forces since 2017. Thousands of people have been killed in Cabo Delgado. Over 1 million people were displaced. Insurgents have attacked villages, burned homes, kidnapped civilians, including children. The government security forces have also been accused of serious abuses, such as extrajudicial killings, torture, arbitrary detentions, while responding to the insurgency. And few of these cases, or none of them, I can say, have been investigated or prosecuted, leaving the victims without justice. So the humanitarian situation in the northern part of Mozambique remains bad, with displaced families facing food insecurity, lack of shelter, and reports of sexual exploitation in displacement camps. We also have cases in that part of the country where activists or women human rights defenders report cases of harassment only or threatens only because they are trying to protect victims of this conflict in the country. The civil society organizations, journalists, and human rights defenders also face increasing restrictions in Mozambique. Laws limiting the work of NGOs, activists, make it harder for independent groups to operate in the country. We have many cases of demonstrators or protests banned or violently dispersed by the security forces and also the police. We had 2 cases last year or no, on 2023 of 2 people that lost their eyes because of this violently response of the police during demonstrations. And so we can say that also in Mozambique, as other countries, the freedom of expression is under threat. Many cases of surveillance, intimidations of activists, harassment of media outlets that criticize the government or expose corruption. So the work that needs to be done in Mozambique internally, but with the support of international comrades, I think is a work to lead to first electoral reform that will create a truly independent electoral commission in Mozambique
to ensure transparency, vote counting, and allow independent monitoring, has most of the cases of instability or political instability in Mozambique is because many of cases of fraud during the elections are reported. So we need a process of election to be more independent. Now we are having this crisis after the 2024 elections, and we need now an open, inclusive talks between the government, opposition, and civil society organizations to address political tensions and rebuild trust. As I mentioned before, that the citizens of Mozambique had lost trust in national institutions. So we need to rebuild that trust. There's a need to end impunity. The state must investigate and hold accountable all parties responsible for abuses during the conflict and in response to protests. So we need to work and create pressure for that to happen. And we also need to pressure the government to remove barriers to NGOs' operations, stop harassments of journalists and activists, and respect the rights to peaceful assembly. And we also need to give more attention to the armed conflict in the northern part of Mozambique. Has the state of Mozambique, most of the times when they go for public speech, they say that they are in control of the situation, but journalists are always showing many cases of people being killed in Cabo Delgado, kidnapping of children. So it shows that the situation is not under control of the state of Mozambique, but of the armed groups that are the insurgents. So there's a need to give more attention to that conflict in Cabo Delgado. So in conclusion, I can say that Mozambique is at a critical point. Without real political reforms and stronger protection of human rights, the post-election crisis and ongoing conflict risk further destabilizing the country. Civil society, regional organizations, and international partners must work together to push for accountability, open dialogue, and meaningful steps toward democratic governance in our country. For now, I'll stop here, and thank you.
Aluta. Aluta. Comrades, I hope you're saying continue, because that is where we want to be, part of a permanent defense for rights and freedoms, particularly for the people of Mozambique. Komshila, your solidarity requests and demands are well noted. Indeed, that we must not forget the war in Cabo Delgado, and why there's a war in the first place. It's really because of our failure to control our natural resources, the greed of our leaders who allow foreign actors to come in and dispossess our people, leaving our people with no other choice but to resist, even in violent ways. The negative situation for human rights and fundamental freedoms is well noted, comrades. The need for open and inclusive talks, well noted. The role of election in Mozambique, as in all our countries, as a source of political instability, and illegitimacy of our leaders, also well noted. We stand in solidarity, and these are common challenges for all of us, meaning that the common motivation for us to remain in solidarity. Thank you, Mozambique. Aluta, continua. Comrade Rashi, Comrade Mahia, you turn to take the podium. We hear the situation in Zim, Comrade Rashi, and then we hear from Tanzania, Comrade Tito, and then Commissioner, Comrade Abiba Osman. It's really good to have you on the panel. We'll seal off on the situation in Mozambique. Thereafter, Dr. Janet, looking forward to hearing from you on the situation regards migration, xenophobia, and what we can do in solidarity. And then we wind up our meeting, hopefully by 12:30. Comrades, please don't leave or go anywhere. Comrashi, are you ready? Then Comrade Tito, and then Habiba up next. So we've had Rashi, come through, Comrade. Time.
Hello?
Yes, come.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade Sambai, and thank you, comrades, colleagues in the region. Mine is a very simple one, a representation of what is happening in Zimbabwe, the state of human rights and democracy in Zimbabwe. I get a sense that there is nothing really different and new from what I hear from comrades and colleagues in the region. The new baby that we are dealing with now, of course, is the amended Private Voluntary Organization Act. That is, of course, is part of the game by the state to close the democratic space for both civil society and ordinary citizens. I think you are all aware, comrades, of the state itself in. Is, of course, a repressive security system that we operate in since 2017. It has been formalized after the coup that took place in 2017 and was celebrated locally. We thought there was some form of change. The ordinary citizens, because they wanted to get rid of President Mugabe, but we got something really worse. So the militarization of the state, of course, is also broadly closed the democratic space in Zimbabwe in many aspects. We have also seen an attempt at mutilating the constitution. This is an attempt to try and claw back on the progressive aspects of the constitution that, of course, provide term limits for the president, and also provided citizens an opportunity to be part of the selection of the judiciary, the judges, and also so we see an attempt by the government in Zimbabwe to try and amend the constitution. So there's a lot of talk about the 2030 agenda to extend the term of the current parliament and the president. And of course, a lot of people have been fighting against that. We've also seen the capture of important institutions like parliament and local authorities. You recall that after the 2023 elections, there was a deliberate effort to decimate the opposition. So now we practically have got a one-party state. We have an opposition in parliament, yet it's not in opposition. They are there to make sure that they get as much from the state as possible. I think Sipo at one time was talking about corruption, and we actually see that as practically taking place in Zimbabwe, corruption of the opposition at both local government level and parliament. So if we're going to check for reforms, fight for reforms, parliament might not be the right place to get the reforms, and yet we want electoral reforms to take place before the next elections, and many other reforms that are supposed to take place. So what then that does is that it has taken away people's confidence in democratic processes in elections. So now the talk in Zimbabwe is so much about elections don't matter. Elections don't bring any change. So you find comrades that were at the forefront of advocating for elections, for participation in elections, are actually in front of advocating for no elections, for not participating in elections. Also, it's largely because people have lost confidence in elections because the outcome seems to be predetermined, and the opposition has not been able to protect that space, and it's not been that organized, and civil society has also been threatened. Civil society has been threatened by the PVO, as I said at the beginning. So what has happened is that there is a lot of fear and mistrust in Zimbabwe within the democratic space, within civil society. You know, you've got the sinners and the saints. There are some that are of the view that the PVO came because there are some activists that are political. And so the state has managed and succeeded in dividing the progressive movement. And when that happens, when there's so much mistrust, you see the value of solidarity platforms, or platforms for coordination, so that we're able to regroup as the progressive movement, as civil society, so that we're able to then start to continue challenging the state in that regard. There's also been closing of the media space, especially you look at the May 23 criminal law codification and reform. And of course, there have been some progressive judgments by the courts in trying to claw back on the patriotic bill component of those reforms. We've also seen the Broadcasting Service Act, where amendments that have been done to it that would then force people to pay licenses for, to make it mandatory for people to pay for licenses. Licenses to a state broadcaster, actually, we were for the monopoly of the broadcast. So people are just forced to buy propaganda that they actually don't even listen to, and they are forced by law to do that. So you add on to that, you are looking also at a state that is celebrated corruption, you know, and civil society's role to hold the state to account. The journalists, media, a lot of people have been arrested when they try to raise these issues and bring the state to account. So you realize that there is closing of the space. And the level of corruption is also is being celebrated. I raise that because there are comrades, there are people in Zimbabwe class that is really known for corruption and linked to the state, and linked to leaders in the state that go about distributing millions of dollars in an environment where there's so much poverty, where people can't even, the majority of our people can't afford a meal a day. So you realize the contrast that are there between what is happening at the political elite level and what's happening at the common man level, where poverty is prevalent, and yet there is evidence that there's so many resources in this country. So you have that situation. So people have lost confidence in electoral processes, in democracy, and a lot of people, of course, have decided to migrate and leave Zimbabwe. So you realize that there's been an increase in migration from Zimbabwe to obviously South Africa and the UK, and these are young people that have just decided to leave, and even old people have decided to leave. And of course, you realize issues of xenophobia taking place in South Africa because of the influx of Zimbabweans as well. And there's so much conversation that we need to have at a regional level. We also have this lack of confidence in the judiciary. You know, in an environment where there's so many, and when the rule of law is not so much respected, you would expect that you will get recourse in the courts. But when you lose confidence in the courts, when you lose confidence to justice, and when many of the judgments on political issues are actually predetermined, or at least people don't have confidence in those, it then undermines people's confidence in the judiciary one, and also it takes away people's resilience and capacity to participate. And also, so there's been a deliberate attempt to target all those that are activists and that are deemed to be a threat to the state. And this, of course, had a greater impact at the personal level and at the broader struggle, because when that happens, the cost of participating in democratic processes and holding the state to account is higher, and it becomes more personal, and therefore the need for us to build psychosocial support to people that are active. But of course, you realize that a lot of people have been targeted at the personal level, and I see it's a trend throughout the region, and this obviously has affected the sense of participation. So you realize that because of this, people have lost their urgency. I think civil society is decimated, divided, fearful, and we are looking for the softer issues to continue operating. We will look at climate change. That is not important, but anything that takes us away, that takes us away from scrutiny from the state. And then when that happens, obviously, the state is not held to account on the core governance and democracy issues. And when that happens, obviously, the impunity reigns, and you will not see any progress. So a lot of people have subcontracted the struggle to others. And also there's this sense of fatigue. There's a sense of fatigue, and we also need to deal with that sense of fatigue, and that's why I think it's important for the solidarity to take place and to create spaces and platforms for solidarity. So what do we need? What do we need? I think the issues that we've raised are obviously issues that are prevalent in Southern Africa. What do we need? In Zimbabwe, we need to deal with issues of solidarity for our fight for electoral reforms. There's been a lot of silence around electoral reforms, because even if you talk about elections in Zimbabwe, people don't want to hear about elections. The majority of people, largely because of the disappointment that they have with the previous elections and what happened post-election. So, but we still need to talk about reforms. We still need to talk about electoral reforms. We need to still talk about electoral reforms. Secondly, we need these solidarity platforms to become more permanent, intentional, and deliberate, because of this fatigue that has taken place, because of this fear that has taken place, that is engulfed civil society and the broader citizenry. We need platforms where we continue to engage on these issues, but also for provision of solidarity, for engagement and sharing information. We also need spaces and platforms for us to be able to engage with the region on how to deal with this legislation that we have requested, like the PVO. And lessons, what are lessons we learn from Tanzania? What are the lessons that we learn from Zambia? What are the lessons that we learn? How have comrades in those spaces dealt with or operated in a context where there's this closing of the space through such legislation? And I think it's important for us to have, and also actually platforms and geographical places to operate from. If we insist, I heard Steve was talking about either you resist, either you conform, or you fight. So if you decide to fight, if you decide to fight, then you need to fight from some safe place. And we think these are conversations that we should have with other comrades in other spaces. But we also need learn lessons on how to re-energize the base, to share practices, to share lessons that have been learned. How do we re-energize the base? How do we reconnect with the ordinary people? How do we reconnect with people's issues? How do we make the struggle a people's struggle, not the struggle, our struggle as civil society leaders, not our struggles as we need to speak to people's issues and what spaces are there regionally in different countries. How do we connect these spaces? How do we connect these islands of democracy and resistance that you find in many spaces? There are spaces of resistance for the labor, whatever form it is in Zimbabwe, there is resistance. The informal traders, there is resistance because they are fighting every day for livelihood and organizing. So how do we connect these islands of democracy, these spaces of democracy, of resistance, and of resilience at a regional level for us to be able to continue fighting the people's struggles. And how do we make sure that the struggle is indeed entirely a struggle of the ordinary men, so that they can then fight their own struggle? And without that, we will not be able to, because like you rightly said, there is, yes. Am I still? Yes. Okay, that's fine. My time is up. That's fine. But I think those are the issues. But the last part, Samba and comrade, the last part is for us. We need to formalize our coordination as SADC civil society. We need to formalize our coordination of this solidarity, so that we're able to continuously engage and share. I heard stories from DRC, from Swaziland. Now I know why I should call it Swaziland and not Eswatini. So thank you very much, colleague. It's just a summary, but thank you for this space, and I will hope to learn a lot from here. Thank you.
Viva, Comrade Rashid, nice and clear, nice and clear. Particularly your emphasis that our solidarity must be permanent, intentional, and deliberate, but also reminding us that we're far from Uhuru in Zimbabwe. It's God help us. I mean, a context where there's repression and there's no confidence in elections. How do you expect your people to resolve these contradictions? So it's a tough moment for Zimbabwe, but it comes back to comrades. You know, just saying, let's re-energize, let's reconnect with people's day-to-day struggles, so that they can, in turn, lend their solidarity to the broader democratic struggles. Viva, comrades, viva! We're running out of time. That's my next challenge, but it's enriching. Yes, comrade Tito, would you mind if we start with comrade Abiba, so that we have our zebra principle nicely flowing? So, Commissioner, if you can come in, Malawi, and then we end up with Tito. Yes. Because there's no time, we're going to have a human rights a shrinking space democracy panel, also with Tito, Comrade Mike, and Comrade Joseph, Zambia and Malawi. So I'd say we have Abiba, Tito. When you give us Tanzania, you then also zero in on the shrinking space, so that Joseph and Michael can come in. And then before 12:30, we must have a moment to just pull together all the solidarity requests and the solidarity commitments that are coming through. Abiba, good to see you, and take the floor.
See you too. Thank you so much. Let me just correct that I'm the executive secretary for the Human Rights Commission. So I'm also delighted to join this convening, just as the other comrades. And perhaps maybe I'll also close my video so that maybe I do it faster. Just to say that indeed we are gathering at a critical moment when the systematic shrinking of civic space across all these countries demands our urgent attention and collective action. And I would also wish to say that from a human rights perspective, there is always this perception that NHRIs are just there as an extension of the state, but we should also remember that within NHRI's national human rights institutions, we are human rights defenders first. So Malawi, just as other nations, is also experiencing and witnessing a growing hostile environment marked by protest suppression, intrusive surveillance, restrictive legislation, and other tactics designed to silence dissent and undermine the rights of to peaceful assembly, association, and free expression. So this has been discussed, but the erosion of civic space is indeed threatening the vital role of civil society, while at the same time weakening democratic accountability and the rollback on hard-won gains in human rights and social justice. And the pattern that is being seen from Zimbabwe to Malawi, you'll notice that extensively our own democracy in Malawi is facing greatest threats since independence. And this has been through legislative and administrative warfare against civil society. So in the Malawian context, as we speak right now, the Human Rights Commission has actually identified areas where protections still need to be strengthened to ensure full enjoyment of the rights of all Malawians. In our colonial era penal code, for example, as the law presents ongoing challenges that needs to be addressed to align with our constitutional values. So the sedition laws and the criminal defamation provisions have been applied against journalists and government critics, while some provisions also in the same continue to criminalize consensual same-sex relations with penalties up to 14 years imprisonment. And the recent NGO Act, the 22 one, has really raised concerns for the Commission and civil society organizations, for it has created new complexities for freedom of association and civic education. So the legal framework actually requires careful review, as stated by colleagues and comrades area, so that we can ensure they support rather than hinder full democratic participation of our citizens. So as the Commission continues to observe these challenges in the areas of freedom of expression, there have been instances where journalists and activists have actually faced challenges, and some peaceful gatherings have been encountered complications. I'm sure most of you have noticed the same through media and other platforms. The worrisome bit is that the NGO board, which really regulates, for example, the issues of NGOs, NGOs reveals that there is intrusion. So there is no longer support, for civil societies, but the regulation is what is worrying. So, for example, even just areas of composition, there's a lot of government presence in it. So, for example, the NGO board, 7 members are already being appointed by the minister in consultation with Kongoma, and 3 ex-officials are government members. So clear civil society majority, 7 versus 3, and only 3 members nominated by Kongoma, which is the body that looks at appointing NGOs. So 8 members are either directly appointed by the minister or are ex-official government positions. So again, their presence is also a worrisome issue. The Human Rights Commission, when this law was being done, there was calls from various sectors to allow the commission to be part of it, but that was rejected. So the restrictions really further extend to the fact that, it is being stated in the law, like, for example, in section 20 of the same, to say that an organization shall not operate as an NGO in Malawi unless the organization is registered under this act. So this transforms registration from a facilitative process into a mandatory licensing scheme, giving government absolute power to determine who can engage in civil society work. This is a tactic that we've seen replicated across Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and other regional states. And then we are also noting that even though there has been an amendment to the authority, new powers under some provisions, there are issues to do with monitoring compliance, review implementation and financial reports, and receiving and investigating and determination of complaints against NGOs, and also just the issue about resolving disputes, making the authority, the NGO authority, both the prosecutor and the judge. So these powers really are mirroring intrusive surveillance at the end of the day, being deployed across the region to monitor and control civil society organizations. Just to quickly go back to maybe finishing, I know that I do not have time. We have noted through the legislative processes that there is elimination of civil society's voice in its governance as part of the broader regional trend towards authoritarian rule. So for us, what we are seeing from all this that is happening, and the call is that as we're going towards 2025, we both face unprecedented challenges and unique opportunities. Of course, I would say that there are concerns particularly concerning brutal assaults on peaceful protesters, systematic disruption of opposition meetings in some areas, and concerns over the electronic management system transparency, which really does threaten the foundation of credible elections. And just some surveys are also showing that, there is no trust for the electoral body. So again, this is also causing issues. Lately, even in some of the manifestos, we've seen about the restrictions of funding for nonprofit actors from donors. So these actions are not really isolated incidents. They form part of a deliberate regional strategy to manipulate electoral outcomes and silence dissent. So our plea, finally, is to also internally ask the immediate withdrawal of the oppressive Angora, this is the Authority Border Compliance Framework, to engage in genuine consultation with civil society organizations, but also we are calling for political parties to cease political violence to ensure that law enforcement protects rather than persecutes peaceful protesters. Again, we are calling for guaranteed transparency and then upholding constitutional provisions. To SADC colleagues, comrades, as well as the SADC leaders, we're asking them that they must invoke peer review mechanisms to address systematic human rights violations, and also suspend participation privileges for governments that flagrantly violate SADC principles of good governance. I know this is just a little time, but comrades, we are united in the solidarity against repressive legislation. So let's also continue amplifying each other's voices to hold our leaders accountable, but also to document and expose the coordinated nature of these attacks on civic space. Thank you so much.
Viva, viva, comrades, powerful, especially, there's a broader regional trend towards authoritarianism, as you rightly note. So our solidarity, our ability to amplify voices, our ability to speak out for and on behalf of each other really becomes much more critical, especially as we are seeing that the space for civil society, even in democratic Malawi, is shrinking. Super worrisome, but thank you, comrades. Powerful. That was Malawi. The context and the solidarity requests well received. Let us move to Tanzania, Comrade Tito. So you give us Tanzania, and then we get on that panel with Comrade Mike and Comrade Joseph, and thereafter comes. I hope we have enough time before half 12. We have barely enough time, but we'll try to squeeze in to really agree on how to strengthen the solidarity platform within the crisis coalition. Yes, comrades from Subsin, Mucha, I hope you also share with us as we focus on the SADC process in August as well. So, Comrade Tito, floor is yours, and then Comrade Mike, and then Comrade Joseph.
Thanks a lot, comrade. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, nice and audible.
Yes. So, well, this has been very much enriching in terms of learning how Africa is connected, rather related in terms of all these atrocities happening in our jurisdictions, but also the kind of solidarity that we see from these dictatorial fronts, which also triggers our quest to forge meaningful solidarity in terms of moving forward and establishing, long-lasting advocacy strategies and durable solutions to the challenges we face. I'm mindful of the time, and I'm not gonna jog around with unnecessaries or repetitive information that has been said by other colleagues, including the opener by Sipo. That was very powerful. But I'll flag a few, I'll highlight a few information relating to Tanzania governance and political landscape. also bearing in mind that we have an election that is scheduled to happen late October this year. With all the contestations and misgivings from the opposition, from the civil society, that there's a feeling that the election will happen. Yes, so Tanzania has been under the ruling party CCM since flag independence in 1960s. And then currently there's been systemic restrictions on the opposition from politically convening. The Chadema party leader, Comrade Tundu Lissu, who most of you must be aware of, is now in prison, facing treason charges, among others. And also the party, Chadema, has been disqualified from running for office until 2030 for allegedly not signing the elections code of conduct, which indeed wasn't mandatory as written on the agenda. It wasn't mandatory, it wasn't prescriptive, and there was no deadline as to when they can sign. And they did so because they had subsisting, misgivings that they wanted to address in terms of the conduct of the election. And also equally, Chadema has been suspended not only from running for office, but from conducting political activities pending the determination of a case that has been filed by former party leaders on division of party assets between Tanzania mainland, Tanganyika, and Zanzibar. And for the purpose of those who don't know, Chadema is an acronym for Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo, Party for Democracy and Development, which is the leading opposition party. Yeah, so that's the situation of political rights and freedom of assembly. But also there's a couple of issues to do with the shrinking of civic space in terms of arrests, arbitrary arrest of human rights defenders, civil society actors, church leaders, the ban on political rallies and assemblies, keeps recurring as an issue, as you'd hear, this group of politicians is not allowed to convene, but those tied up with the ruling party would convene easily. There's also been crackdown on public dissent and activism, with people facing charges, cyber charges, having for comment on matters of public interest. And then broadly, freedom of expression is under siege, with the country seeing limited access to social media platforms such as X, Telegram, and Clubhouse. These platforms are known for heated political debates in the country. And the government was of the view that X allows access to restricted content, including pornography. So that was their excuse, but we reliably know that they are trying to restrict political conversations on social media. Independent journalists and the media have been harassed, some suspended, and it dates back. These are recurring with I know one online media outlet was suspended for 3 months earlier this year. Others are facing show cause letters from the Communication Regulatory Body. But also the Cyber Crimes Act is still critically used. We have the incidents of enforced disappearances, targeting dissent, especially young human rights defenders and political activists. Incidents of extrajudicial killings, with last year, a Chadema party leader, Ali Kibao, was snatched out of the bus and was, later on, after 24 hours, found killed with his body disfigured by acid. And ever since, there's not been meaningful investigation or public information as to what is happening in terms of accountability. Religious leaders are under attack equally, with a couple of incidents this year. About 60 religious leaders who also comment on matters of public interest Some attacked. A Roman Catholic bishop was attacked. He spent a couple of weeks in the hospital, and the church believed that that was assassination plan that failed. Retaliation against indigenous communities, the Maasai, this has been there for the past 4 years. They have been targeted with critical state policies, relocation, and also they have not been able to enjoy their rights in their ancestral land. We have seen attacks on foreign activists, including the recent attack on Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atwaili. They were sexually assaulted and tortured while in Dar es Salaam attending the trial of Tundu Lissu. A couple of international human rights lawyers and respected continental jurists were also deported, some to Kenya, some to Uganda. They were not let in to attend Tundu Lissu's trial in the country. There's persistent corruption in procurement and the functionality of the judiciary, which also signals, the lack of effective grievance mechanisms as we head to the election. We gain a feeling that maybe the situation might, get a little bit worse with people lacking the means to access justice. In terms of the general human rights situation, as I finish, we have been rated low by some of the international organizations that do survey, that do evaluation. We are drifting, we are shrinking into a situation that looks like now the state is captured by elites, and then we are led by an elite consensus, not rather than the rule of law. And also there's a feeling that as a country, we are losing track in terms of democratic standing, and people are getting to know the situation in Tanzania with an interest, with the interest of election. Then people are getting to look at Tanzania, but some of these atrocities been there from time to time. What have we done? Before I go to the last point, yes, we are doing the obvious sometimes, and as people say that maybe we need to be a little bit more creative in terms of identifying or being adaptable to the authoritarian innovation. So we always in court, we are defending Tundu Lissu in court. We are defending people being persecuted and targeted. We are doing public awareness, calls like this one. We are convening on Twitter Spaces. It's very difficult in Tanzania to protest, as in taking to the streets. But again, people are also increasingly becoming creative in terms of saying, let's send emails to the president. If we send 10,000 emails in a day, maybe this might trigger their response, or we might disrupt their convenience at office and maybe get something out of it. Yeah, and also we are appealing to our regional human rights mechanisms, with the AU special procedure mechanisms, with the UN systems. We've filed quite a lot of communications, especially this year, also with the limitation that nothing really comes out of these mechanisms other than appeal later, sometimes visits which are diplomatic and might not really give us an outcome. Yes, the last thing that I would want to flag is the lessons, because you said I should speak about this. Lessons on restrictive NGO laws and creative navigation. Yeah, but I think for us in the region, especially in the East African region, we are taking some measures, including petitioning restrictive NGO laws, because we know the importance of NGOs. We know the importance of opening up a civic space. So we are taking these measures through advocacy, but also through judicial mechanisms. We are currently petitioning the internet shutdown before the High Court of Tanzania, but also we are taking the East African Court of Justice. We're also taking other measures, and I'm sharing this as a lesson, as reframing the language and mandate, coalition building, shadow operation, and the parallel entities parallel with other entities abroad. Digital activism, also exploiting legal loopholes, but also focusing on subnational, maybe local government advocates to rally support of, community-based movements and organizations. But also, as Sipo said in the opener, yeah, we must also be a little bit more flexible in organizational identity, but also collaborate with others. Solidarity has been overemphasized. Yeah, and also constantly be adaptive in operational and strategies. Thank you so much, comrades, for listening to me.
Thank you, comrades. Thank you, my comrades, especially for the rich lessons, building on what Sifa was emphasizing, that repression is adapting and innovating, and so must our solidarity and our joint purposes. So coalition building, shadowing institutions, digital activism. So we have a very strong toolbox. The thing is to make important use of it and to scale it up through coalition building. Comrade Joseph, you're up next from Zambia, and then Comrade Michael, just to zero in, especially on the shrinking space human rights issue. Doc Mulakamwe, not forgotten, also looking forward to hearing from you.
I'm about to go into another meeting.
Comrades, don't leave us. Half of will be done, promise. Just these two interventions from Joseph and Michael, and then Dr. Mulakamwe, and then we round off by 12:30. Please bear with us, Doc.
Okay.
Joseph.
Good afternoon, comrade.
Yes.
It's Josiah from Chapter 1 Foundation in Zambia. I'll be quite quick. And specifically, I'll discuss some of the ways that Zambian civil society are navigating the restrictive NGO landscape. Zambia enacted an NGO Act in 2009, and some of its provisions are quite restrictive and grant the state broad powers to interfere in the operations of NGOs. And this is in the context of broader legislative reforms that do not lend themselves to enhancing democratic governance or protecting human rights. So this is a trend which is not new. It's something that's been happening for a long time. So in the NGO Act, there are provisions around mandatory registration with harsh penalties for non-compliance. There's government-dominated oversight, which can be easily manipulated to silence critical voices, and all that is accompanied by very stringent and harsh punitive measures. So some of the things that we've been doing as Zambian civil society is strategic compliance. I think somebody's mic is.
It was Agent named Wexler. He said he'd been trying to reach you. Yeah, he wants some messages. I haven't had a chance to close it.
The mic.
He just wanted you to know that he was returning.
Admin, please.
Go off and gave the announcements. They're done with it. He's in his own phone. I don't.
Hey, bueno, Comrade KZ, OM iPhone.
They have been muted. Please go ahead, Comrade.
Okay. So one of the things we've been doing is strategic compliance with legislation. So in this ecosystem of legislation, there are some laws that provide some better protections than the NGO Act. So a lot of NGOs are not registered under the NGO Act because at least as of now, there's no law preventing this. So laws such as the Companies Act, the Lands and Deeds Registration, the Lands and Deeds Perpetual Succession Act, the Societies Act, more especially the Companies and Lands and Deeds Perpetual Succession Act, offer some additional protections. So the agency that administers the Companies Act is relatively independent and more professional than, let me say, it's not manned by civil servants. So it's a lot more professional. So those additional protections is one way we're navigating the landscape. But in addition to that, there are some CSOs that are registered under the NGO Act. But in the negotiations, and I'll discuss negotiations as one of the strategies. In the negotiations with the government over the NGO Act, government agreed to not implement the punitive measures some time back. But what the compliance has given us an opportunity to do is be a part of platforms such as the NGO Council, which is a body established under the Act. So it provides an additional platform for critical voices to be at the decision-making table. So that way we can get information about what's happening, what decisions are ongoing around NGO legislation from colleagues that are part of this NGO council. So strategic compliance in a way. And then strategic compliance also offers some level of due process protection, additional due process protection. So rather than immediately just closing an NGO, it's easier to argue in court when challenging that decision that we are compliant, we are registered, and the due process hasn't been followed according to the Act. Because that's often where, when states are targeting civil society, often due process is ignored. So some level of strategic compliance provides additional protections. Then in relation to that, it's the leveraging alternative legal frameworks. I mentioned the Companies Act and the Lands Perpetual Succession Act. Those offer additional protections whereby if the government wants to close down a critical CSO, it has to go through a court decision for a winding up process to be undertaken. This is not to say those other pieces of legislation are perfect, but some of the provisions offer additional protections to navigate repressive governments. Something that we always have to remind ourselves is the repression the law represents is often needs to be implemented by a government. So it's rather repressive governments implementing laws that allow this nature of repression. Another thing that we've been able to do is leveraging sort of the alternative legal frameworks is highlighting the resource implications. So for instance, Chapter 1 Foundation is registered under the Companies Act as a company limited by guarantee. We file our returns with the agency, we pay to the agency. So highlighting the implications of for instance, the requirement that we move from the registration under this agency to a different law means that within the government, we create a situation where government departments have to make an argument or a case for why it's important that we remain under their statute or under their administration. And that gives us some additional level of protection. It's sort of getting government on your side unintentionally on their part. Then the other thing I mentioned is negotiations with government, and the negotiations take different formats. So to arrive at the decision that the punitive provisions of the NGO Act do not be implemented, civil society organizations went to court, and a consent agreement was entered by civil society and the government at the time. And as part of that consent, government agreed to develop an NGO policy that would inform the review of the NGO Act, which is still a process ongoing. And we've hit some hurdles, but that level of negotiation and using different tools like legal advocacy to leverage power and relationships helps. In addition to that, an NGO bill was presented recently. Civil society rallied against against the bill, and we were invited to meet the president, and we raised our concerns around the provisions of the bill and highlighted that this law and others had been key campaign messages of his, and that resulted in the deferral of the NGO bill. So that's another way we've been leveraging, we've been navigating the restrictive landscape. We're aware that sometimes, yes? Hello?
1 more minute, bro.
Okay, I'll go quickly. So negotiations, then something that we often forget as civil society is valuing the small wins. Sometimes we want to think of, want to achieve these big wins of the law being amended, but we also need to appreciate the small incremental steps as building blocks towards better legal frameworks and better administration of those legal frameworks. So I think it's something we should not overlook, valuing the small wins. I will end here with a final note on the importance of solidarity, not just regional, but also national solidarity. When Chapter 1 goes out and speaks on its own, the voice is, our message isn't as strong as when we do it as part of a coalition. When we do it as part of a coalition of local NGOs or a coalition of regional, international NGOs. So the importance of solidarity should not be lost on us. I'll end here and thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts. Thank you.
Viva, powerful, especially ended on a high note. Our messages are stronger when we come out as a coalition together, echoing the same voice. Yes, super appreciated. Comrade Mike from Malawi, if you can come through. Well received comments, Josiah, whilst Mike is coming through. Obviously within the Zambian context where you're able to still negotiate with your leaders and to get some concessions. It's good to see how you're able to push the boundaries of the law to make it work for the people. Not all of us can do the same, but yes, Viva Chapter 1 in Zambia. Michael, are you ready? The Malawi context?
Yes, I don't know whether you can hear me, comrade.
Nice and clear. Nice and clear. 5
good.
minutes, Michael.
Good. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. And good morning, good afternoon to everyone who has joined this important conversation. So in Malawi, our challenges are not very different from the challenges in Zambia and Zimbabwe and generally in the region. We have a law on NGO that has so many problematic provisions. Just to name a few, the law which was amended in 2022 has made it mandatory for NGOs to register. So, of course, this is not a new provision. The NGO Act of 2001 also had a similar provision. The amendment has retained this provision, which implies that NGOs have to be registered. If you're not registered, you're not allowed to operate. And as we have always argued, this provision is inconsistent with Section 32 of our Constitution, which guarantees everyone the right to freedom of association. It's also inconsistent with the Article 22 of the International Civil and the Political Rights. In addition to that, the current law has also given the NGO regulatory authority overall broad powers to monitor NGO compliance. These powers include even powers to check and verify documents, powers to even make unannounced visits to NGOs, which also creates the risk of government interference. The law has also introduced the disproportionate sanctions for non-compliance. So, for example, the law provides that if an NGO is not complying, with the provisions of the Act, it can be deregistered. It also runs the risk of penalties, which includes a 5 million kwacha penalty, which if we translate it to US dollars, that's around 3,000 US dollars. And that's a lot of money for most local NGOs who are donor dependent. In addition to that, the law has also introduced personal liability. So if my organization is found to have violated provisions of the Act, as director, I could be liable for prosecution. I could be imprisoned for two years, in addition to paying the fine. And we are saying this is inconsistent with the Section 32 of the Constitution, but also international best practice. These are some of the problematic provisions that are in the law. Of course, there are numerous others. There are also NGO regulations that have been developed based on the amended Act. And these regulations also have a lot of problematic provisions. There are issues of licensing fees. So an organization has to apply for a license, an operating license, and this license comes at a cost, and the cost is determined based on the previous year's income. So if an organization had money last year, the license fee would be based on that. And the challenge with that is that, as you know, CSOs or NGOs, we are donor dependent, and our income is not fixed. I would have more funding in the previous budget, but this year I'll find myself in a situation where I don't have enough funding, but I'll still have to pay a lot of money. Currently, like our organization is in the bracket of 1 million kwacha, which is not small money. So we have to pay that whether we have had the funding this year or not, which for us undermines the right to freedom of association. And then there's also the requirement for registered NGOs to provide annual returns. And the annual returns implies that you have to do an audit. And most of the organizations, because of the current funding squeeze, are finding themselves in a situation where they can't even hire a professional auditor to do their audits. So these are some of the challenges that we continue to face as NGOs. Of course, there have been efforts to challenge the law when the law was still a bill, when it was still a draft bill. Our organization partnered with the other organizations like Youth and Society, Church and Society, to challenge some of these provisions, and we were successful at that level, in the sense that we granted an injunction, preventing Parliament from tabling the bill. But then the government side was clever; they changed the wording of the bill, and then he presented the bill in Parliament as a new bill altogether. So those are some of the challenges that we have faced. Strategic litigation hasn't really worked. Of course, we are currently mobilizing, to challenge this law, some of these provisions. The challenge, of course, at the moment is resources, hiring a lawyer, but also I think, as you know, there's a risk also that if the litigation is not successful, we could be slapped with costs. We have seen this, in previous attempts. So we are trying to see how best we can approach this. But the litigation is one of the strategies that we are using. Another strategy that we're using is to engage Parliament. Now, Malawi will be going to the polls next month, where we are going to elect the president and the new members of Parliament, and of course, councillors. So as part of our strategy, we wanted to ensure that when we have a new crop of MPs, we engage them so that we present the issues and then, persuade them to support an amendment to some of those provisions, an amendment to the law. So those are some of the things that we are currently planning to do post-election. In terms of, again, in navigating the challenges, we are working more and more. We are encouraging loose networks. So NGOs, CSOs, we are, more and more coming together to conduct advocacy, because the current law has raised the risk that governance NGOs like ourselves, for example, could become targets if we, because of the fact that we are usually, critical of the government, and because of that, we have been labeled in the past as anti-government. So that could be, there's a risk that we could be targeted. And the other thing also is the politicization of the NGO Regulatory Authority. The practice in the past has been that the head of the NGO Regulatory Authority is usually a political appointee, which is, of course, not supposed to be the case. It's illegal, but they have their own way of putting their man in charge. So you find that the current one, who has just, of course, resigned recently because he's going to contest as a member of parliament for the ruling party, but he is a politician. And then the previous ones, it was also the same. They were political appointees. And because of that, there's a risk that the NGO Regulatory Authority could be politicized, and that would disadvantage organizations that are critical, like ourselves and many others. So to navigate that risk, what we are doing is working more and more, in coalitions, working with other organizations, so that it's not just the CHRR, speaking on an issue, but all of us or a group of NGOs coming together to address a specific issue. And this is helping quite a lot, because I don't think there's a government or a provision that would want to, to victimize a group of CSOs. But if it's one NGO, the risk is greater that you could become a target, and you were trying to avoid that, as much as possible. Of course, we are also engaging regional and international mechanism. We have reported the African Commission. We have also submitted reports, to other monitoring, to the monitoring bodies. In November, Malawi will be reviewed under the Universal Periodic Review, and that's one of the things that also will be reported. So, in a nutshell, that's how we are navigating the challenges that the new NGO law has presented. Thank you.
Looks like the conference is over.
The crisis of shrinking space.
Comrade Chair, can I go ahead? Are we hacked or?
Please go ahead, Doc. I think there's a technical on Comrade.
Yeah, there's a lot of hacking taking place. I almost got hacked now. But anyways, for my other
please, Doc. Thank you.
Revolutionary greetings, everyone. Now I'm just jumping in because I had another meeting that I had set aside, which I need to jump on. And thank you so much. I'm just gonna put my mic off as well, so that I focus on the running down the key points that I was meant to actually emphasize in my presentation. Thank you so much, Tate, for giving me the platform and the crisis in Zimbabwe coalition team. Basically, I'm so, I actually feel I'll speak to you today with a deep humility and unwavering conviction as we gather here to commemorate not only our African unity and solidarity under the banner of Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, but also Women's Month. Although I'm very, very disappointed and touched by the presentation from Tanzania, given the current unfolding repression that's happening, unfolding in a country that is led by one of us, of which we all celebrated that they're in power and now women are leading, but it's very depressing when one has to get to hear all these depressing issues. The depressing issues from the DRSC, the depressing issues from Mozambique, and all what we know is that they'll actually narrow down to the issue of forced migration. So I was actually requested to speak about this broad title, which is quite exciting as well, Confronting Xenophobia, Safeguarding Regional Stability and Pan-African Solidarity in Southern Africa. This is very important in a way, but given the amount of time left, I think I'll touch briefly on some of the key aspects, key elements of the presentation. Here, as we are gathered, I think is to galvanize regional unity, solidarity, and shared destiny as a people, as civil society, as representatives from different sections of society, communities. I'm so glad that in his opening remarks and keynote address, Dr. Sipho emphasized the centrality of a people-centered approach, involvement of people that we actually stand, for in terms of representing them. So for me, as I'm trying to digest all that has been said by all other speakers, earlier speakers, I'm really also reminded about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's profound words that Africa must unite or perish. So after having saying all this, it's very important to begin to digest as to, are we for unity or should we perish, given what we have heard from Comrade Mahia from Zimbabwe, in which a civil society, due to all the pressures, repressive regimes, they're trying to copy and, in a strategic way, in strategic ways in which could actually fragment the civil society itself, because now it's all competition for resources as far as I can get it. So the key questions then remain trying to link all this. Can we truly speak of African unity and solidarity while our borders bleed with division? That's in the context of xenophobia. In other words, what does solidarity look like? I like this question that Vuyo raised earlier. How do we balance national sovereignty with regional solidarity? I guess at this point, I should jump on to remind us that the liberation of Southern Africa was not achieved in isolation. It was forged through solidarity across borders, across cultures, across struggles. And it actually culminated in the establishment of the Southern African Development Community, which has been a beacon of cooperation, resilience, and hope. But is this true from what we are experiencing today? It's unfortunate that we confront a challenge that threatens the very foundation of our collective progress, a challenge that strikes at the heart of our unity and undermines the dream of a united Africa. And that challenge is xenophobia. What exactly is xenophobia? Xenophobia in this particular context, I think, from the simple definition of xenophobia from the Collins whatever dictionary, it's fear or hatred, right, of alien or foreigner, and also it very often manifests itself in discrimination, violence, and exclusion. It's unfortunate that the xenophobia we're experiencing in Southern Africa, I'm saying Southern Africa, not really specific to South Africa, because there are also culprits within Southern Africa, aside South Africa, that also instigating xenophobia in a way, whether structural, even though some of the tensions are not really of that. So all those issues are very important, but most importantly about this definition of xenophobia in the context of how we are experiencing it here in Africa, Southern African region specifically, it's what we call Afrophobia, which is particularly targeted at African migrants, such that it poses a growing threat to peace, integration, and development in Southern Africa. So we're not looking at that xenophobia that's just merely about, oh, I've met somebody on the street, then I'm a bit worried, you know. But we are now looking at racial capitalism, racialized form of xenophobia that actually targeted at the skin color and the origins. Funny enough, it's so ironic. So we actually self-hating each other. So these are some of the issues that actually violate the principles of Pan-Africanism and human rights. Paradoxically, while I heard from each and every speaker around the issue of shrinking civic space, which is really a huge cause for concern. Of worry for me is that paradoxically, in the context of South Africa, the open civic space has been appropriated by a proliferation of vigilante groupings such as Operation Dudula, Put South Africa First, March and March. I'm not going to get deep into that because of time, but I'm just trying to give a panoramic view to our colleagues who are also from further away from South Africa, perhaps those in Tanzania who might not be well versed on what is happening in this particular country. So this corroborates apparently with earlier points by Dr. Sipo around the issue of it's not only authoritarian regimes who are culprits in terms of repression, the kind of repression, the forms of repression we are experiencing today, but also democratic regimes. Imagine one cannot imagine that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. And yet today we find the state bureaucrats, the leadership, the executives, everyone has paid a blind eye towards what's happening on the ground. For almost a month, the vigilante groupings that I've actually mentioned have deployed individuals to man hospitals, clinics, 24/7. We don't even know who is actually sponsoring or funding them to ensure that no migrant, no asylum seeker, no refugee would enter the hospitals. Apparently, one has to produce a green ID card, but recently they've even changed their modus apparent. So now they actually even looking at even myself as a permanent resident who's got an ID, obviously they're going to look at there are some features on the ID that can tell that, okay, Jeanette is holding, is a holder of the green ID book, but she doesn't belong. She's she's just a permanent resident. So all those particular aspects of elimination or othering of fellow Africans, it's really a big cause for concern. The other big headache is that all human rights most human rights defenders have been targeted. There have been threats, death threats, rape threats on human rights defenders who actually are leading some of these public litigation organizations like SERI, we do have SERI, we have Helen Suzman Foundation, we have Lawyers for Human Rights. Apparently, the former executive director of Helen Suzman Foundation had to resign end of 2023 after experiencing much pressure from these vigilantist groupings who strongly feel that African migrants should not be defended, their rights shouldn't be safeguarded, they have no rights, they're actually supposed to be out of the country. So just to try and quickly run down and summarize, so for us, it's really a cause for concern that really need everyone, to pay particular attention to not only that, but we actually would want to galvanize as much support as possible, because as a people, as civil society, as the masses, if we don't come together, we divided, and yet we do have lots of problems, economic problems, social problems, ecological problems today, as we are experiencing the ramifications and effects of climate change. So our leaders are actually scapegoating, unfortunately. They go on the same table, pat each other's back when they meet at SADC level. And at the end of the day, still ourselves as ordinary people, we can't really relate on the ground. So this xenophobia, I guess it's something that we all need. It's a common issue that even if we are still in our own respective colonial borders, sovereignties of the colonial borders, wherever we are located right now, as a people, we need to get back to basics and begin to raise those particular questions as to what if tomorrow I wake up, I'm forced to move and relocate somewhere else? Would I really want to be exposed or tortured simply because I've been forced to move? We have had issues around sexual violations happening in the DRC, Mozambique, so it really needs all of us to have to come to the table and evoke back the spirit of Ubuntu, evoke back the spirit that I'm because we are, and replace it, with love, solidarity, unity, and all those kind of other, important social relations that we all would want to live in. So just to round up my presentation, I think I really want to leave some policy proposals, because for me, I think this conference is also timely in the sense that it's actually trying to consolidate inputs for submissions to the SADC heads of state. So as I raised earlier on, that it's our own leadership that have failed us, because right now we understand at some point there were some tensions between Zimbabwe and Zimbabwean government, South African government around this matter some years back, 2 years back, when a woman was denied, a pregnant woman was denied access to labor services in Limpopo there. But what we have noted is that despite all that's happening on the ground, these leaders, the SADC leaders, still very much prioritize and value their diplomatic relations. So while they're busy perhaps in Madagascar there, I think it would be great for us to remind them about some of the issues that have resulted in us having all these particular problems. The issues around weak enforcement of SADC protocol and facilitation of movement of persons. This is an area I always feel strongly every time I get to a platform speaking about migration, especially from a perspective of the South SADC region. So what happened to the SADC protocol on the facilitation of movement of persons? Those are the critical questions we need to raise there, because yes, we understand SADC is an economic bloc, but it being an economic bloc, it really values obviously trade relations, investments and so forth. But also what we also understand is that if we have inequalities among the SADC countries themselves, it simply means that capital will be concentrated in one place, such that we all understand labor follows capital. So if we allow a certain particular country, yes, we celebrate their big economy and what, still if they can't absorb the entire, population of the region, what then should we do? So we should actually perhaps begin to have that conversation around equitable distribution of resources across the region, but also fair trade relations, investments, policies and so forth. And also, it's also very important for us as civil society to be on guard. Even if I haven't had much solidarity or messages of solidarity coming through from other commissions, I'm so glad that we do have the Malawian Commission today around what's happening here in the context of South Africa, human rights violations due to xenophobia, and then the violation of rights of those who stand up to defend the rights of migrants. All these people we are talking about are local NGOs, but they really need our support. Just a message to say, thank you, we are with you. What kind of support should we render to you? We understand you are actually under this pressure simply because you are trying to support your fellow African brothers and sisters. So we also need strong engagements around civil society. Civil society, in fact, should take it as part of its programming, the issues around migration policy. I wish the crisis in Zimbabwe would perhaps lead us in having perhaps a strong task team to really discuss this issue of migration, not as an ad hoc, but as part of the mainstream programming for our collaborative efforts. I think we also need to develop some ethical standards and support journalists, those who actually carry or write our stories and raise awareness out there. And of course, most importantly, to promote Pan-African history and civic education. I'm not so sure how we're gonna go about all this, but just to reaffirm that Ubuntu is what is central, humanity. I am because we are, and also to remind our SADC leaders around the AU Agenda 2063 and its vision for integration, emphasize the role of diaspora communities in building bridges. Let's celebrate our cross-border success stories in trade, culture, and innovation together. So basically, to round up, the call to action is for our leaders to act decisively to confront xenophobia and reaffirm their commitment to a united, peaceful, and inclusive SADC. The time to safeguard our shared future is now, and we must confront xenophobic scourge, not with rhetoric, but with resolve, clear resolve. I've noted some media messages making round in which there are some claims that the president of South Africa has denounced xenophobia, but that's not enough. I think we need to really find that space in which we need to lobby, talk, negotiate, or bring to attention what exactly are we talking about. It shouldn't be just a matter of leaders meeting to discuss trade, but also meeting to discuss social relations and issues. So yeah, I think for now, I think I just want to emphasize that together we can, together we must, together we will. Malibongwe, and please enjoy your Women's Month wherever you are. Thank you so much. Over to you, Chair. I hope
Viva,
I'm not,
thank you,
not left
Doc
alone
Makamwe.
here.
It's 1 o'clock. Comrades, we're supposed to end this thing in 30 minutes. Doc, your treatise on xenophobia and how it destabilizes the region, spot on. Something that needs to be a mainstay in our programming as a coalition. Yes. 2 last minutes. Please bear with me, comrades. May I please have, before you sign out of this meeting, please may you just share on the chat box the recommendations in general terms about our solidarity, the crisis in Zimbabwe coalition, the regional platform in particular, how we can strengthen it, how we can revitalize it, to speak to all the solidarity requests and demands that we've had in this meeting, and then also your specific requests for inclusion into the position to SADC. So I'm inviting Dr. Vava to come through with the closing remarks. But in the meantime, Combs, please may you share in the chat box your recommendations. Comvava, would you like to come through? But meanwhile, comrades, I need to see a lot more on the chat box, please, so that we have more issues. I believe we need another one, more of these kinds of meeting more regularly, and also physically, so that we share the energy. So, Dr. Vava, come through with the close chat. Comrades, please don't leave the platform without adding strength and wisdom onto the chat box. Yes. Dr. Vava.
Thank you, Comrade Fambai, for excellently hosting and moderating this platform. I also, on behalf of the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, wish to extend our gratitude to the speakers that gave their all, gave us insights, gave us ideas, but also inspired us in what we need to do as we strengthen our solidarity in the region. I also wish to extend gratitude to the leadership of the coalition, the secretariat, for putting up this important platform. I wouldn't want to repeat on what was discussed because we are way beyond our time, and I know that there are some who want to rush for other things and it's already lunchtime. But just to say, we will consolidate what is came out of this meeting, that some that also coming through the chat box, and we will be able to communicate with everyone who is here and release a communique to that effect. But I must say in my parting shots that the coalition is not going to stop, and I also wish to highlight to you that we are some of the organizations that have not registered and that do not even intend to register, but we are employing other tactics to make sure that we resist, we fight, but more importantly, we continue with the work and strengthen our regional solidarity as a coalition. So in those parting shots, thank you, everyone. Those who are in Zimbabwe, I know that a holiday is coming through. Those who are traveling for SADC, for the Substance Summit and the other processes that are happening, safe travel, and goodbye, everyone, until we meet next time. Thank you.
Viva Doc Vava. Amandla.
Chair, I would want to
Luta.
thank my colleagues, team who had to stay for too long waiting to hear and in support. I think we need to catch up also with Kopanang Africa. They've sent their chat. Thank you so much, comrades, for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Comrades from SADC, we look forward to more detail about Madagascar and solidarity work. Let us keep the coalition alive, comrades. It's a coalition we need for these times of repression and oppression, of shrunk space, of despondence and apathy, comrades. Let's keep the fire burning. Let's keep in touch. Let's make solidarity a reality. More on the chat box, please, Combs. I'm appreciating. We need more. And then I think the Secretariat from Crisis will invite us to a follow-up so that we can see how the outcomes from these meetings will be transferred onto SADC and onto the Madagascar process coming through. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Tate. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Vavan.
Thank you.
The
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doc.
Comrade
Thank you,
Murade.
colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.